He came to the neck on a low tide, when the water went sluggish as old blood and the rushes nodded as if in prayer. The barge barely woke the river. It was no more than a floating plank raft with a low shelter of oiled canvas, guided by a poleman who moved as quietly as a stalking bird. The air was damp in a way desert men called a kind of pity. It lay across the skin, a weight of breath that smelled of peat, marsh blossoms, and the fishy cold that seeped from the bones of the ground. By midday, the sunlight was only a paler tone of the same gray. Oberyn wore a dark cloak that was almost black when wet, beaded with the thin drizzle that never decided to be rain. Ellaria sat across from him with the shelter flap parted so she could lean out and watch the reeds go by, a hand gloved in deerskin, a laugh not laugh at the corners of her mouth when the eels surfaced, slipped, vanished. She looked as though the weather were a game she had agreed to play only to humor someone she loved. The poleman was a lean, mud-colored man with a scar on his forearm, a line as neat as a drawn reed. He had not given his name yet, and Oberyn doubted he would without being asked twice. The pole clunked against something hidden in the water, and the barge tipped a little to the left. Oberyn adjusted, very little, and the short spear beside him did not roll. He had chosen a gray haft for it, and a blade blued by a smith who owed him no love and spoke of favors as if each were a wound. He had left the sand's bright colors behind, as conspicuous here as torchlight in a crypt, and dressed as a minor lord steward traveling north on an errand too dull to share. "Your water is shy," Oberyn observed. He kept his tone more gentle than he would have in the south. The land suggested it. It remembers men moving over it in armor. The poleman looked over his shoulder. His eyes were the color of pond water and his hair the color of pond roots. He said, "Armor sinks." Ellaria laughed softly, and the sound came and went in the fog as if eaten by the river. "Do you have a name for everything?" she asked the poleman. "For the things that matter," he said. "We've names enough." He pushed again, and the barge slid around a promontory of reeds that were unexpectedly tall. A bird with stilt legs picked its way among the stalks, each step a kind of question. This run is called the Lizard's Tongue for the way it splits from the green fork and licks back again. That clump is old men's teeth. This shore is where a kettle of iron sank the year of the late snows. There's dead men under the boggier spots and old kings under the dry. "And under the kings?" Oberyn asked. "Roots," the poleman said. "Not all of 'em in trees. They passed a dead pine half submerged, its branches black as a burned hand." The poleman shifted the boat with delicate changes of weight, feet sure on the slick planks. Oberyn watched him the way he watched dancing, distantly pleased by grace. His thoughts drifted where thoughts went when the sky was a lid pressed low, there, to a courtyard of sun and the bitter pulp of pomegranates. Farther, to a birthing room that had never seen pomegranate or sun. Then back, always back, to the present, because to live too long elsewhere was to die. They saw no one for hours, though several someone saw them. Eyes that lifted, registered, and slid away like seals into thick water. The reeds closed behind them, whispering. The land's voice here was one breath, a hiss as of sleeping snakes. The poleman's scarred arm flexed, and the barge glided between two hummocks where the grass went pale as an old man's hair. "Soon enough," Ellaria said. "I shall start to miss the sand burning my feet." "Then you will be very glad indeed," said Oberyn, "when we are north enough to need furs as thick as mattresses." Ellaria's smile was a slanted line. "It isn't the cold I mind. It is the way this place refuses to be seen. In Dorne, all is frankness. The land is a man with his shirt off. Here the land wears 3 cloaks and tells you that's all he needs." "Your tongue is a blade, lady," the poleman murmured without looking at her. "There are nights when the fog thickens and the frogs sing prayers, and you are sure if you walked out onto the flats you could go to sleep and wake in your grandfather's boyhood. But if you lie down, you do not wake." Ellaria leaned back, satisfied. A decent warning wrapped in good cloth. "Thank you." She flicked a bead of water from her glove and watched it drop without rippling the river. Near dusk, when the light became a bruise and the drizzle stopped as if it had been told a story and needed a moment, the barge came into a clearing on water, and there was a man standing in a boat no wider than his shoulders. He stood as if the water were ground. He wore a coat sewn in overlapping scales of hardened leather, green as pondweed and dull with use, and his hair was the same peat dark as the poleman's. A long frog spear leaned against his shoulder. He did not greet them. He watched until they were close enough to see the bright point of a fishbone that hung from a thong at his throat. His face was narrow and sharp and seemed built to see long distances. When the boats were near enough for a hand to cross, he said, "Prince from the south." There had been secrecy and shadow traded for this meeting, the quiet passing of coin to men who did not believe in the existence of court souls, and a message sewn into the hem of a washerwoman's skirt, and a second message spoken at a village well in the plainest voice one could imagine. Oberyn had kept his own name in his mouth and nowhere else. He had asked to see the one man who could tell him something true. He bowed his bare head, not deeply. "Howland Reed," he said. The man's mouth twitched very slightly in a way that was not a smile. "The marsh knows who walks on it," he said. "You are not wearing your history on your skin, Prince. But it is in your hands." Oberyn GL glanced down at his hands and did not see Eliah's hand in his own, or the shadow of a mountain. He saw his knuckles, long and knotted, a small callus where a spear rested even when it did not, and a faint pale line where a jealous man had cut him once in a back alley in Lannisport. He looked back at Howland Reed and found that the Cranagman's eyes were on Ilaria. "And you," Reed said. "Ilaria Sand," she said. "I do not bring my children into reedy places. I have left them in the sun." "Good," Reed said, and turned the boat with a flick of his spear as if it were a wrist bone. "Follow." They followed through a path so narrow it seemed too mean for the boat they rowed, through curtains of reed and water birch, under a branch that had gathered 3 nests and trapped a torn bit of blue cloth. A dragonfly landed on Oberyn's knee. They came at last to a patch of water that opened like an eye and found a low island of peat and grass and gray roots. On it, what might have been a hall if halls were made by things that float. The structure was not truly on the ground. It seemed to breathe with the slow movement of water under it, bound to the earth by thick ropes, its poles sunk deep, its planks fitted close. Smoke came from a hole in its roof. It smelled of alder and peat and the skins of river things. Reed stepped off without getting his boots wet. The poleman eased the barge up until a little reed-woven mat slapped the hull, and Ilaria came up first, light as a cat though she laughed at herself for the sound the mat made. Oberyn followed, and for a heartbeat he felt the balance of the floating hull through his soles, as if he were standing on the back of something alive and old. Inside, the hall was low and warm. The walls were covered with hanging mats woven with patterns that made the eye travel in circles, and here and there were little shelves carved out of the posts on which were set things that might have been charms. A fish's jawbone bleached white. A tiny stone stained red as if with wine. A small glass bottle stoppered with wax and full of black water. A fire burned bright in a clay-lined pit, and the meat that turned on a spit was something between a pig and a fish in scent. There were 3 other people inside. A woman who did not rise, who sat with her legs folded under her and a baby asleep against her chest. A boy with a hunter's narrow wrists who was mending a net with a bone needle. An older man with hair gone completely white but eyes that saw all the same way a knife cuts everything it touches. None of them gave them leave or welcome. Howland did not ask them to. Reed set his frog spear against the wall and sat with the comfort of one who never learned to sprawl. He gestured to the fire. "Be warm," he said. "The warmth is ours." He looked at Oberyn and Ilaria in turn. "There are rules here that aren't spoken much. One is that you do not tell us our home smells strange. Another is that we do not tell you your feet are loud. We will do well together if we pretend our mothers taught us the same table manners." Ilaria smiled without malice. "My mother taught me to put a hand to my mouth when I cough and to speak no ill of a cook." "Then we will feed you," Reed said, and nodded to the boy, who rose to fetch a bowl and a ladle with gravity. "Men from the dry country do not often come after the wet has closed around us. When they do, they want an answer they could not get on land. If your question is foolish, no one will say so, but we will forget you before you are gone from our door. If your question is wise, we will remember you for a little while after." Oberyn sat, arranging himself with the economy of a man who knew many ways to sit. He let his cloak fall open and felt the marsh warmth find his chest through the wool. The woman by the fire made a motion with one hand that indicated meat, and he nodded thanks. He did not look at her face too long, because he had learned there were places where staring was a tax you paid and never got change. "I did not come for comfort," he said, "though this is better than the inn at Barrowbridge, which smelled of cabbage kept as a memory." He waited for the faint smile that did not come. "I came to ask about a dead girl and the boy born in her last breath." The woman by the fire shifted for the first time. The older man with white hair set down whatever he had in his lap. It was a length of net weighted with stones, without a sound. The boy paused with the ladle pouring, and it poured onto the dirt and steamed. Howland Reed did not move at all. He might have been a carved image of himself. "You ask of old rooms," Reed said at last. "You ask of a stair with 7 steps, of a window with 4 spokes. You ask of a bed that held 2 people and then 3 and then 2 again. You ask of the men who were left behind because duty means sometimes you stand where you are put." Oberyn did not exhale. "I ask of Lyanna Stark," he said, so that the name went like a small stone into a vast pool. "I ask of what was done to her and what was sung about her and what was asked before she closed her eyes. I ask because my sister's bones lie in a place where the sun is clean and the ground is our ground, and the men who gave her to her end are not answered for. I ask because there are songs now of 2 maidens who were loved in different ways and used as if altars had never been invented. I ask because I would like to see the men who made those songs bite their tongues off in their sleep." The woman made a breath through her nose. It might have been laughter or pain or acknowledgement. The boy resumed pouring. The steam rose and spun like a ghost leaving. Reed looked at the coals long enough that a whole fish could have turned to ash, and then he said, "I was a small man in a big war. I am still a small man. I had a friend who was taller than me and had a laugh like a drawbridge dropping and a quiet way of thinking that made men feel bigger when they ere near him. That man followed a path that led him to a door only certain men enter. He found me there. I went with him through the door because I had given him something, my back to guard, and my breath, and my word. We found the men we expected with the swords they were told to hold. Inside there was a girl who had been called 1,000 names, none of them her own. The older man with the white hair made as if to speak and then didn't. The baby woke, made a small squeal as of a bird dreaming, and slept again. She had a fever that ate her like a slow fire, and she had something in her arms that was new and no crime at all," Reed said, and his voice did not change but became very soft in its hardness. "She asked my friend for something, and it was not to break the world or make the past kinder. She asked for a promise that would require him to live the rest of his life like a secret with feet. He carried the secret away. I carried the memory of the room because that was my share. This is all I will say." Ilaria had not moved for the length of a song. Now she said, "It is enough." Her voice was not quite gentle and not quite sure. "We did not come to steal a dead girl's last words so men in taverns could use them." Oberyn had felt arguments forming, like stones in his mouth, each with an edge different from the next. He swallowed them. "I have heard the story told as if it were a ballad with 2 notes, one sharp with conquest and one flat with doom. I have heard it told as a warning about princes and poets. I have heard it told as if women were pouches men carry their desires in. I think the truth is smaller and larger than those tunes. I think a man who loved a woman used the wrong language to love her, and another man who loved her brother used the right language to carry away what she held." Reed tipped his head. "If you are hoping to find a name to put your spear into and call it the end," he said, "you will be disappointed. The world is a chair with 3 good legs and one that keeps getting carved shorter." "I do not want the end," Oberyn said. "I want to begin again. If I cannot avenge a woman as my sister, I will avenge a woman as a woman. If I cannot bring down walls with one blow, I will take mortar out with a knife. If I cannot cut an oak with one stroke, I can cut every root that feeds it." "You want to join the wolves?" the older white-haired man said. His voice was a scrape over stone. "The wolves are short on names they can trust." "I want to join hunger," Oberyn answered. "The wolves are the hunger that remembers where it came from. The woman by the fire looked up at him for the first time then. Her eyes were dark as the river under ice. "You're a man who loves heat and applauses himself when the heat is his," she said. "The north is colder than that. Do you have the patience to sleep outside of glory and make a bed of it?" Ilaria turned her face to the woman and said, "That is the only bed he ever sleeps well in." A silence came that was not hostile. It was a silence that recognized work and thought. Reed took a bowl and dipped it full and handed it to Oberyn and then another to Ilaria, and took his own only when the others had been served. The stew tasted of a shore he had never known he'd missed. Fish fat and fiddleheads, a bitter green that bit like a small snake and then kissed more gently, a sweetness like onion that had never seen a dry shelf. He ate slowly, surprised that hungers he did not know the names for were being fed. "When you leave here," Reed said after a time, when the fire had eaten one log and asked for another, "you should go to Grey Sun Mire. There is a woman there who can tell you which trees remember who passed under them. She talks to our gods better than I do. From there, an old road will take you to barrels that have been rotting since men believed would lasted forever. Follow the barrels and you will find a place where the water forgets to be everywhere and becomes a river. You can go to Moat Cailin if you wish to see how men built against their fear. But if you want the wolves, you will have to go farther." "North," Oberyn said, though the word made his mouth feel a little stranger. "How far?" "The wall," the older man said, the scrape again. "If there is a Stark you can speak to and not get a knife in your ribs for your pains, he is there." Ilaria lowered her empty bowl to her knee and closed both hands around it. After a long time she said, "I did not think we would go so far." Oberyn looked at the fire. "I did," he said, and heard in his own voice a thing he hadn't let himself hear since he left Sunspear. A way of admitting fate was a coast and he was a swimmer. Reed's boy, the one with the bone needle and the nets, cleared his throat. He had a voice like reed wood, soft and firm. "There is something else," he said, and flushed but went on. "There are men with flayed men on their shields moving. They came as traders and they smelled like sheep that had died under their own wool. They passed north 2 days ago in small groups and I saw the one who led them. His hair looks like pale bread and his beard looks like what's left in the bowl after you've poured the gravy away." He was laughing though no one had made a joke. "Bolton men," Oberyn said quietly. "On summer days the Dreadfort's banners look ridiculous. But on days like this I suppose they even make sense. They look ridiculous to the dead under them," Reed said. He set his bowl down beside the fire and the bowl did not make a sound. "You are not wrong to be disgusted with men who make songs about women they did not know. But there are other disgusts, and some of them wear very practical boots." "Practical boots," Ilaria murmured, almost a prayer. "The worst kind." They slept that night in a corner of the hall where a reed mat might have been 1,000 silks by the way it kept the damp from their bones. Ilaria's breath was warm as a hidden spring against his N. At some hour later than hours he used in the south, Oberyn's eyes opened in the dark and knew they were not at home. He lay very still and felt the hall move slightly under him. Deep in the earth, or perhaps only deep in himself, he heard his sister's voice saying something practical about where a dresser should go in a room that had not yet been built. The words didn't matter, only the way she sounded when she knew she had chosen well. He closed his eyes again, and this time when sleep took him it did not carry him past any shores he knew. The next morning the weather remembered to rain. They took the barge out in it, and for a time that might have been an afternoon or an hour they slid through worlds that would never be mapped. Pools that reflected clouds even when the sky was a dull lid. Old trees drinking lying down, the little whitening bones of birds lying where nothing as obvious as teeth had gotten them. They saw 2 watchmen in a canoe stitched of bark. The watchmen did nothing and the canoe moved away as if thought were oars. At the place Reed had called Grey Sun Mire stood a woman as if she had sprouted with the bulrushes. She was older than Howland Reed and younger than dried peat, with hair like birds' nests and eyes like a woman who had invented a language and forgotten to tell anyone. She tapped her cane against the boat and did not speak to Oberyn at all. She spoke to Ilaria, and what she said was, "When you are older, take off your shoes and put them in your lap and understand what feet are for." Ilaria said, smiling slightly, "I will, grandmother." And the woman's thin mouth became a straight line that meant pleasure. "Howland told you we were coming," Oberyn said when given leave. "Something told me," the woman said, and led them to a place where a tree leaned so far it had changed the idea of leaning. At its base, the earth had turned itself inside out to hold the tangle of roots. In that open space were scattered objects that might have been offerings or might have been the remnants of small lives. A wooden toy shaped like a fish with one eye drilled. A circlet of woven blue rush. A candle burned down to the wick and then stopped as if a thought had interrupted it forever. The woman put her hand flat on the tree's trunk and spoke clicks and hums that were not words but the bones that words grew on. She did it long enough that a small pain started in Oberyn's knees from standing. He did not shift. At last she spoke something words could hold. "The trees say the same as the water," she said. "A boy walked with a ghost and a giant once through here and the ground remembers. Wolves are far and near the way thunder is. You want to climb a wall to speak to one. You won't fall if you remember to keep your eyes where your hands are. You make a prince into a boy again," Ilaria said. "I approve." The old woman chuckled. "Princes are only boys with spies. Go north, southern children. There are little gods everywhere. I don't know what the large ones are doing." She tore a strip from a bit of smoked fish with her teeth like a saw and handed it to Ilaria, then gave a smaller piece to Oberyn with an indulgence that stung and pleased him both. "Lady," he said, and bowed with the simplicity he reserved for people who had nothing to buy. The rain slowed as if they had spoken to it. They passed 3 barrels sodden and swelling like bodies that had eaten too well in life. They found the river to which all the water they had known thus far had been only a rehearsal. A dark ribbon with a push in its back, its banks armored in long grass and low shrubs more stubborn than any courtier. They shared the river with tree limbs and a log with 2 turtles clinging to it and a little boat rowed by a girl with a face so serious it was a kind of joke. To the west, the moors stretched like a tired woman. Moat Cailin rose from the flats like the bones of a dead beast half sunk. Oberyn had seen fortresses that thought highly of themselves. Red stone and white marble and towers that reached not so much to the sky as to the admiration of those who had to look at them. Moat Cailin had been built by men who did not care if you admired them so long as your bones did not pass beyond that place. It was half ruin and still more ferocious than anything he had seen in full pride. Towers like smashed teeth, walls like knuckles that had broken but still clenched. The earth itself gathered into lines like muscle. No one welcomed them there either. The weather did not speak, and the wind made no more of a sound than when it moved through a field of spears. They walked where Reed had told them to and found the old gatehouse on the firmest ground. A raven sat on a rock and looked at them with the mean patience of a debt collector. Ilaria put her palm flat on one of the black stones and said, "I can hear them. The men who made it," Oberyn said. "The men who were stopped by it," Ilaria said, "and had to turn around and see what it means to have to turn around." She shook her hand and winced. "There is a cold here that makes a hand feel like a lie." "Then let us not need our hands," Oberyn said, and for one extravagant moment he saw in his mind Dorne's banners, spear and sun, flying on this ruin. He let the picture go. It was the kind of idea that ate all the others. They went on. The river became other rivers, smaller and quicker, and then less numerous and slower. The forest was deciduous first, and then a chorus of pine. The needles a million thoughts that all sounded alike in wind. The villages were like stones in a stream, offering ripples rather than obstacles. Oberyn learned the names of the beers and the names of the people who brewed them and the names of the illnesses that killed those people half the time and the names of the superstitions that kept them alive the other half. He learned that in the north every story has a version that ends badly and a version that ends worse, and hat laughter is a way to say I am not finished yet. They skirted a hunting party with antler horns on their belts. They shared a fire with 3 charcoal burners who had never seen a southern man in their lives and asked so politely if the sand made his feet smoother that Oberyn wanted to kiss them. He told them a story about a fox that outwitted a mayor, and they told him a story about a woman who married a bear and died of happiness when he was killed. That night he lay awake listening to Ilaria's breath and the singing of far water and thought about the differences men made on purpose and those the land made without caring. In a small inn with a sagging thatch and a sign painted with what might have been a cow if the painter had ever seen one, a man with 2 small eyes took a seat at their table without asking. He wore a fur cap even inside, and his fingers had the careful ease of someone who could steal a lace from a boot without the boot noticing. "You have the look of sour wine," he said to Oberyn, uninvited. "You're not a lord, and you're not a farmer, and your woman has a tongue that would slice stale bread." "Then you've said 3 true things in a row," Oberyn replied mildly. "You're not here to buy wool," the man went on. "Men who buy wool have a way of looking at women's shoulders like they'd like to measure them. Men who come for would look at beams. Men who come for revenge look like you do." "And how do I look?" Oberyn asked, very amiable. "As if your shoulders expect to carry something that doesn't belong to you and you're going to carry it anyway," the man said. "I'm no priest to tell you to put it down. I'm only here to tell you that if your journey goes farther, you will piss ice." Oberyn smiled then, for real. "And that would be?" He let the question hang like a strip of drying cloth. "The wall," the man said, and made his mouth an O as if the word itself were a chill. "You can see it on clear days long before you get there, and on days like this you feel it in your teeth. It hums through the ground if you know how to listen. The old men hear it in their knees. You will learn." "Have you been?" Ilaria asked. "No," the man said, as if it were an impoliteness to suppose. "But my brother built baskets for a man whose cousin saw it once. He never married after. Said there was enough marriage in that. Said it made him feel like a child in a room with 7 doors and no one to tell him which to open. I don't see why that would be a bad thing myself." "We are going there," Oberyn said. "Do you have any advice besides what my toes already know?" "2," the man replied. "Don't say out loud what you think about their oaths unless you mean to take one. Don't think it matters what you thought you wanted when you came. The wall doesn't humor wishes. It sorts them." In the morning the frost had silvered the grass, and the cow on the sign had grown a sort of grim smile where the paint had peeled. They went on with their cloaks heavier and their breath sheathed in white. The road turned to stone for a time, then to rutted mud, then to a bare strip at the edge of a field of winter wheat that had given up the idea of being green. The towns were fewer and far between, the men's voices on the road gone by the time they turned their heads to look. To the west, hills rose like the backs of sleeping giants under blankets of trees. One afternoon that had pretended it would be fair and then wasn't, they came along a track where the ruts were edged with ice and the trees made a kind of tunnel through which air flowed like an ocean. They saw the first of the wildlings then. 3 women in furs sewn with gut and 10 men behind them with bows that looked like knives that wanted to be something else. The women watched Oberyn as if deciding what to think of the idea of him. Ilaria lifted a hand, and one of the women lifted hers back, a gesture that made more sense in this cold. It was proof you had fingers. The wildlings passed without words, the way river water passes. "People from beyond the wall," Ilaria said after they had gone. "They do not look like monsters." "No," Oberyn said. "They look like people who have lived where the weather is a religion." "Isn't everyone in the north?" Ilaria asked. "Perhaps," Oberyn said. "But their gods sometimes answer." When they came to the King's Road proper, it was like walking onto a story that had almost forgotten it was one. The road went on in a line longer than a sentence, and along it moved a little caravan of men in brown cloaks, and a wagon with 2 wheels that had seen better spokes, and a horse with a notch in its ear. The driver of the wagon nodded to Oberyn and Ilaria with the ease of a man who had nodded to so many faces his neck no longer cared. The man walked in front with a halberd on his shoulder and eyes that measured distance like a merchant measured cloth. They were all going north. At the last town before the long empty land began, they bought furs from a woman who looked at Oberyn as if he were a story told to frighten children into bed. "That one," she said, pointing to the largest pelt, "was on a thing that would have taken your face off to get to the meat behind your jaw. Tried. You don't want to know how long it took to skin it." "Of course I do," Oberyn said, and the woman, surprised into laughter, told him anyway. He wrapped himself in a new weight. The fur smelled of animal and smoke and that high, dry scent snow sometimes has in places where it is a guest, not king. Ilaria, who had always loved cloth with an intelligence of its own, wore a collar that, on a Southron woman, would have been an affectation. Here it was armor. She moved in it as if she had been born in that shape. He couldn't stop looking at her. On the last morning before they would see the thing the man in the inn had called a hum, they stopped sooner than usual at a copse of pines because Ilaria wanted to watch the light go. She said it as good to watch the day end when you were at the end of a long thought. They sat at the base of a tree and the wind brought them the distant clack of a blacksmith's hammer and something else, like someone sweeping a hearth with a broom made of cold. Oberyn tried not to make it into a metaphor. Let it be the thing it was. "Tell me what you want," Ilaria said. It was a dangerous kindness, offered as if it were not. He thought about being theatrical. He let the idea sit like a bright object and then he discarded it neatly. "I want a thing that doesn't exist," he said. "I want a world where the men who made songs out of women choke on them, and the men who made tools out of women lose their hands, and the men who shrugged and said it was the way of things wake up with the way of things sitting on their chests until they can't breathe. I want my sister's name to be said softly only by those who put water out for stray cats. I want to turn the neck of a man who used a baby as a message. I want..." He cut himself off, not because there were no more words, but because the words were a kind of drug, and he did not take drugs before a climb. Ilaria said, "You want to make things equal?" "No," he said, and the honesty surprised him. "I want to make them pay. Equality is something priests say when the wrong people have the knives." She leaned her head back against the pine and watched the last light go as if it were a boat leaving. "All right," she said. "Then I want what you want, and I want something else. I want us to remember we are alive while we are hungry. There are men who forget and it eats them from the inside and makes a shadow of what they were. Promise me you won't be a shadow." He breathed and the air was like wine that had been left uncorked too long. It had a little bite left and a memory of sweetness. "I promise, if only because a shadow leaves no footprints, and I intend to go where they will see them." He reached across and put his hand over hers where it lay on the fur of her collar. A pine cone dropped nearby heavily, like a thought falling out of a mind. In the morning, they walked out of the trees and saw the wall. It rose from the land the way a cliff rose from a sea that had forgot how to be water. The light struck it and moved on, too small to make a difference. It was more a fact than a thing. Oberyn had thought he was prepared. The first sight of it made his body understand something his mind had only been admiring. That men could make a mountain if there were enough of them and enough time, and that a mountain could be a promise. He did not say aloud any of the clever words that had suggested themselves to him in the long days of approach. Not a one of them could have found a handhold on that blue-white face. The road became very explicit about where it wanted travelers. There was an inn because there always is, but it seemed ashamed of itself. There were outbuildings and sheds with the blunt shapes of utility. There were men in black moving like crows that knew they were law. Oberyn, who had known many uniforms and the pride and pettiness that came with them, recognized here something that wasn't pride or pettiness. The men walked as if they had very carefully given up the right to be charming. A boy who might have been 20, with cheeks chapped and the beginning of a beard that looked like he'd made a pact with it and then broken it, stopped them with a spear the way a gate stops wind. "If you're here to look, look," he said as if he were reciting. "But keep your hands down. If you're here to pass, say why." "To speak to the men who keep the gate," Oberyn said. "And if the men who keep the gate don't want to speak?" the boy asked, genuinely curious. "Then we will stand here until they do," Oberyn said. Not so much with iron as with the calm of someone for whom waiting was one of the ways anger passed through the body. Someone must have sent word that there was a man at the foot of the wall who looked like a story, because they were brought not into an office or a room meant to be formal, but to a yard where men were beating the cold out of themselves with practiced swords and someone was barking orders in a voice like a good stone. A boy fought another boy, and both of them hit hard enough to mean it and soft enough to live. A man with a gray head and a face like closing a book watched, his arms folded, and said to someone standing a little at his shoulder, "That one will die of stubbornness someday, unless someone teaches him it's a kind of stupidity. That one would die of cleverness if you taught him too much," said the someone, and although the voice was young, it had already learned it could ask a room to listen. The someone turned. He was all the things they had said about him and none of them. He had a face built for a first son's gravity and a bastard's caution. The cold had bitten him and left its mark in a way that did not diminish him. It seemed to have been folded into him. His hair was black and his eyes were the color of a lake seen from a cliff. He walked as if he came home to himself at every step. Oberyn had a lifetime of first words prepared for men like this: prince's greetings, bandits' jokes, scholars' questions. He did a thing he had rarely done. He gave his name first, simply, and waited. The young man looked at him, then at Ilaria. His gaze, never once slipping into the place men's eyes, often went without permission. "Jon Snow," he said. There was a little stir in the air that was not the wind. It was as if the wall itself nodded. "Lord Snow," said the gray-headed man. "Do you want me to make them comfortable?" "If they were afraid of discomfort, they would not have come this far," Jon said. He looked at the spear at Oberyn's back and then at the hands that held nothing. "You are a long way from your son." "Men go where the stories they hate are being told," Oberyn said. "I am here because the world that killed my sister is being acted out again by men who have learned nothing. I am here because a girl died in a place attended by songs, and the men who made the songs do not remember her face." Jon's face did not change, but something in him leaned closer. "You think there is a Stark here," he said. "I think there is a boy who learned honor as a mother tongue and was then told to speak it only in his sleep," Oberyn replied. "I think there is a wolf whose teeth are being used to cut bread more often than to bite throats. Do you have time to talk, Lord Snow?" The gray-headed man made a sound under his breath like a laugh being born. "He has time to talk while he eats," he said. "If he doesn't eat, I'll have his hide and stuff it with straw to stand in the yard as a warning." Jon nodded, a gesture that was part obedience and part command. Very northern. "Come," he said, as if they had always known they would, and led them inside to a hall where the light was a yellow reason to keep breathing. The benches were rough and the table was scarred with years. A pot of something that pretended to be stew did its best to taste like the memory of meat. A man with a long face and the aspect of someone who prepares discouragement as others prepare breakfast sat near the end and watched them like weather. "Bowen Marsh," Jon said without ceremony. "They've come from the south." "I can tell," Bowen Marsh said. "They look like people who think my work is a kind of hobby." He did not say it to be cruel. It was the kind of sentence a man says when he is married to a difficult duty. "What do you want?" "To speak to the man who remembers his aunt," Oberyn said. That stirred the air again, but this time it was not the wall that nodded. It was something in Jon Snow's spine. He did not sit right away. He stood with his hand flat on the back of the bench, and the hand was the only part of him that betrayed anything. It flexed once and then was still. "Eat while you talk," he said. "There is no rule that says grief must always be hungry." Oberyn did not look at Ilaria because he knew if he did he would see pride and fear in equal measure, and he had not learned yet how to hold them both without trembling. He took a spoon and made a home for it in his fist. "I met a small man in a land where the ground has more memory than men," he said. "He told me a story without telling it. It included a fever and a promise and a boy who was no crime. If there is any good left in me, Lord Snow, it is because I know the difference between secrets that keep people safe and secrets that keep them small. I am only here to say that the woman in that room should be avenged as my sister should. Not by making more charred houses, but by proving the men who used them were wrong about everything." Jon sat then. He had a way of sitting that looked like he was agreeing with gravity. "I cannot leave," he said, and did not say it again or dress it up. "If you are here to ask me to ride with you and put my banner where the snow is red, I cannot. If you are here to tell me men are cruel and mercy is weak, I will listen, but I will not agree. If you are here to ask me about my aunt, I cannot say what you wish to hear. There are things about her I know from the sound of rooms when certain names are said. There are things I have been told by men who did not mean to tell them. But none of them are mine to give away like bread handed to children. What I can tell you is what happens when men think a woman's death is a cause. I have seen that, It looks like boys breathing in their own blood in the mud. Bowen Marsh stirred. "You have seen many things," he said in his careful way. "I have seen snow that did not melt and dead men who could walk. I have seen men like you come north to make deals with their own blood, and I have seen them go home with their fingers and their promises missing." He looked at Oberyn without heat. "If you want to kill Freys and Boltons and Lions, you do not need our help. If you want to save the world, sit down and cut wood." Ilaria said, "Sometimes cutting wood is how you save the world." Her voice was mild because in this place sharpness would have been a mistake. "And sometimes you need to tell boys in mud that you at least know their names. We have come because even in the south there are men who understand that your wall is not only a story to frighten children. We have brought something." Oberyn glanced at her. He had expected to be the one to make this play, and she had made it with that dry, tender audacity that had made him love her. He watched Jon watch her as one recognizes a bird not common in these parts, with wariness and interest and a small pleasure he's not sure is permitted. "What?" Jon asked. She set a small bundle on the table wrapped in oilcloth and unwound it. Inside were 6 daggers, each in its sheath, the sheaths wrapped in felt. She drew one. The blade was dark, almost black, with a shine that seemed to live under its skin. It was not steel. It had been knapped with a precision that made Oberyn's palm itch in the imagination of its bite. The flake scars made the blade look like the idea of ice. "This is glass that is not," Ilaria said, "from a place where the mountains carry old stories in their roots. A man in a cave showed it to a man on a river once, and he showed it to me because I kept my eyes off his teeth. Dragonglass," the gray-headed man breathed, and in his voice there was a note that removed his casual disdain from everything else in the room. He reached for the dagger without asking and caught himself with visible effort and looked at Jon. "With your leave, Lord Snow." Jon took one and weighed it. The cold seemed to go into him and come back changed. He held the blade up and its edge cut the lamplight. "Where did you get these?" he asked, and it was no longer a formality. It was a man inside a duty recognizing an answer newly possible. "There are men who will sell their tools," Ilaria said. "There are men who do not know the names of what they find and do not care so long as grain is grain. There are also men who know exactly what they have and would rather die than part with it. These did not come from the last kind of man. There are more." "Not many," Oberyn said. "Enough to make a difference in a place where stories are truer than the songs." Jon's eyes had an expression now that Oberyn recognized from mirrors. Calculation that was also an ethic. He set the dragonglass down as if setting down a promise. "You brought these to the wall. We brought them to whoever is honest enough to use them only on true enemies," Ilaria said. "If that is you, they are yours. If it is that man with the hands that look like they would rather read, then they are his. If it is a woman who will come next spring with her eyes narrow from squinting at men's lies, then keep them for her. But do not give them out at random. We did not carry them through water and cold to hand them to fools." The long-faced man at the end of the bench made a sound that might have been genuine amusement. "We do not hand good knives to fools," he said. "There is a place beyond this," Oberyn said quietly. He had meant to say these words later, with the weight of new friendship behind them. He found he could not wait. "There is a city where lions sit in chairs and pretend the chairs are thrones. There is a tower where a man taught a mountain to walk. There is a river where a bridge was allowed to become a man's idea of himself, and the cost of crossing it was paid in uncles and nephews. There is a hall where men eat each other. All of that is not as far away as men would like to pretend in rooms like this. I am going to break some of those chairs and carry splinters in my pockets for the wolves to see. I am going to make the mountain lie down or find which bone should be spitefully removed from his body to teach him obedience. I am going to drown a bridge under the bodies of the fools who built their pride on it. I am going to go where the hall is and say I have business with the butcher." The silence in the hall changed shape. It wasn't awe and it wasn't scorn. It was a recognition that a man had said he was going to do a thing and might try to do it. Jon said, "You speak like a man who knows how to endure an hour that lasts a year." "I have had a few," Oberyn said. I have also had hours that lasted a drink. I prefer the first. You remember more afterward. I cannot go with you, Jon said again, with no defiance and no apology. But there are men with wolves in them south of here who will know what to do with your anger. Some are discreet and some are loud. The Lord of White Harbor loves a cooked phrase, and he chews the fat of politics better than any man I have met. If you can stomach his forms, he will teach you to ride the current and not drown. There are glovers in the woods who live like ghosts and are better friends than kings. There is a woman who used to live on Bear Island and now lives on the idea of promises. If you can find her, she will give you her daughter's words like bread. He paused, and a little light of something almost like humor passed through him. You may also find men who say they are wolves and are in fact dogs taught to snarl. You will need to tell the difference quickly. I am good at telling the difference, Oberyn said. I make men show me their teeth before I let them shake my hand. You will need to keep your eye on the north even when you're south, Jon said. There are things rising that will make all your chairs and your bridges and your mountains look like toy things in a child's bed. If you want to honor your sister and my aunt, keep something in your heart for the living. Revenge is hot. The first winter storm will put it out as if it were a candle. Justice is what you can still feel under your hands when your hands are numb. Oberyn looked past Jon's shoulder through a narrow slit of window. A white bird cut the gray sky in half, and both halves fell together again at once. He thought of Elia's wrist when she was a child, the tenderness of the bones in it, the way she had held her hand when she wrote letters to cousins. Angled, like someone who had been told once her hand was too pretty for work. He thought of Lyanna Stark as Reed had described her without describing. A fever and a bed and a boy who was not a sin. He thought of men turning women into causes and the women becoming lost in the shape of a cause, the way a face becomes a blur on a banner waved too high for too long. I will keep my hands on wood, he said. And the spear. You will need friends, Jon said, and you will have enemies who will wear your livery before they show their true colors. If you want a letter for White Harbor, I will write one and say you are a man with a mind and a history. If you want a letter for a ghost, I will scratch one into the bark of a tree and let the wind carry it. If you want nothing, then take this instead. He put his palm flat on the table and pushed across to Oberyn a little thing Oberyn first took for trash. A small iron dagger token. It was cheap. It was something a boy might win by beating a friend in a game of strength. I won this my second day here, Jon said. It is a silly prize. Keep it. When you are about to do something theatrical, put it in your fist and remember that if you die the wall won't care. If you live, the wall still won't care. Then do what you were going to do, only better. Oberyn took the little dagger token. It lay in his palm the way small truths do. Lightly, but with a barb in them somewhere you'd find only later if you weren't respectful. He closed his fist. I am not often given gifts by men who mean them, he said. I am not often asked for help by men who need it, Jon said with equal simplicity. Bowen Marsh made a sound that might have been a wish for fewer human moments in his day. The gray-headed man leaned back. ND smiled in a manner that acknowledged the room was warmer for what had been said, whether or not the stew could be made better. Well, he said, if you two are finished with your epigraphs, there is work. He rose and barked a command into the yard that made the boys outside set their feet more firmly under them. Ilaria, watching all, had the look she wore when I have seen something new and I am going to leave myself room to admire it later. She put the dragon glass back in its wrappings and pushed it gently toward Jon. I meant what I said, she told him. Do not give these to fools. I will not, Jon said. But sometimes fools find their way to good work. I've seen it. Then give one to a fool, she said and smiled. They stayed that night in a small cell not meant for guests and therefore perfect for them. For walls and a bed that said you're alive, which is enough, and a brazier that did not cough at them. The wind did the polite thing and did not rattle the shutters as if to demand admittance. In the middle of the night, a sound like a hand dragged over stone woke them. It was only the wall humming, the man in the inn had said. This is the sound of the world being held back from falling in on you. The thought came to Oberyn with a clarity that felt like punishment. Are you awake? Ilaria asked in the dark. Yes, "Are you sorry? For what?" he asked, honestly not sure. "For needing what you need so badly you will make a map out of a stranger's face," she said. He lay still. He could lie here. He had learned long ago how to honor the truth with a lie. He did not. "Yes," he said, "I am sorry, and I am not. And I do not know how to get only one of those." "That is because you are not a priest," she said gently. "Priests are men who think they can order feelings like cups on a shelf. We are not priests. We are women and men." He reached across in the dark and found her hand and held it, and the heat in his palm was the answer. In the morning, John gave them a letter sealed with black wax. It had a careful hand that had learned to write under a tutelage that said words mattered. It said only that the bearers were to be kept safe and listened to, and that he, Jon Snow, considered them people who had a right to speak. Oberyn tucked it into the inside of his shirt. As they left the yard, the gray-headed man. He had learned his name in passing, a name that carried the air of a road. Fell in with them for a few steps. "If you see a girl who looks at you like she is measuring your worth at the same time she is trying to guess how your knife is balanced, do not turn your back on her," he said. "Or do and see if you live. It would be educational." "What is her name?" Ilaria asked. "She has many," the man said, and smiled with a satisfaction that suggested he lived on names and would never go hungry. They went south again. The wall remained what it was behind them, which was somehow both a relief and an insult. The wind had come to agree with their ears and did not sting. The road had the kindness of familiarity. They walked and made plans that were not yet strategies but had the shape of strategies. Names became strings on which to lay beads. Fry, Bolton, Clegane, Lorch, dead in some other tangle but not forgotten. Lannister. Not a name but a tower of names in which each stone thought it was a man. At a place where the King's Road crossed a small river by a bridge held up by a stubborn idea of itself, they found a boy with a mouth too quick for the work his hands were doing. He was mending a boot while arguing with a girl who was not arguing at all so much as watching him to see if he would keep talking. The girl had a face like a blade kept in a kitchen drawer. Useful, dangerous, and often underappreciated. The boy called them sir and lady without being servile and asked them if they were from Bravos because he had never met anyone from anywhere without first asking if they were from Bravos. They were not, and he looked disappointed because a story he'd wanted to tell would have to wait. It heartened Oberyn to meet him for reasons that would have embarrassed him if he named them. In a stand of birches where the bark peeled off like the skin of too ripe fruit, they came upon a woman wearing mail under a dark cloak. She had the look of someone who had once been told a very good joke and had been waiting ever since to find the person who would understand it. Her sword was old but polished. She eyed them and did not smile, but something like courtesy happened in her face. "Do you know a man called Reed?" Oberyn asked on a hunch that made itself known the way a scent does. "I know a distance called the neck," she said, which was answer enough. "You are carrying south in your shoulders. You mean to use it?" "Yes," Oberyn answered, letting the honesty show through his teeth. "Good," she said. "When you come to the place where there are ships and a man who cannot climb stairs without a rest, you will find someone with hands soft as fat who will talk lovably about the law. He will be your friend if you let him think he has discovered you. Do not be discovered. Present yourself like truth that has agreed, as a favor to be written down." "You are very kind," Ilaria said. "What should we call you, if we survive and talk about you in a room where there is wine?" The woman considered the birches as if they had asked a better question than any of the humans. "Call me a person who has been loyal to a dead boy longer than most men are to themselves," she said. "It will serve." The road served up encounters like courses in a meal, each with its own seasoning. A spearsman from the Rills with a scar across his belly that meant he had once survived a decision that should have killed him, who said, "If you see a wolf with one ear, do not try to pet it." A woman in a red scarf who sold onions and looked at Ilaria as if they knew they had at some time traded the same coin. A man with 2 fingers on one hand who warned them away from a path and would not say why and was perhaps wrong and perhaps right, and in either case had done his duty by his conscience. White Harbor was their goal, at least for the first act of what Oberyn knew now would be many. It lay to the east like an idea in a man's head who had eaten his fill and then wanted something sweet. They turned toward it, leaving the King's Road. The land changed and wore its prosperity like a fat man who carried his weight well. Fields were fenced and sheep wore bells that sounded like contentment. The river ran wider and slower, and a smell of salt came like a story you wanted to hear again, though you knew how it ended. They came to the walls under a gray noon. The harbor was a mouth with many teeth. Ships coming and going, sails like wet laundry. A statue in leathers held a sword aloft to frighten enemies and to remind friends what friends were for. Men on the walls walked with the look of men who had the leisure to consider ideas while on duty. At the gate, a sergeant with a face arranged by good meals and exasperation said, "Name and business." As if he were turning a page he had turned 1,000 times before. "Oberyn of the South," Oberyn said, which was true enough to be a good lie. "We are here to buy a certain kind of fish and to speak to a man who likes to chew his thoughts." The sergeant looked at him and did not change expression. "You've come to the right place for thinking," he said, "and for fish." He glanced at their letter. He did that carefully, as if knowing letters sometimes bit. He led them through the gate and into a city that smelled like work done well. Fish and tar and bread and coin. When they stood before Lord Wyman Manderley, it was in a hall that knew what to do with appetites. And a man who loved words like butter loved bread looked at them and smiled as if a story had just walked in under its own power. He was big, not in the way tall is big, but in the way solidity is a kind of argument. His hands were white and soft, and they could have been cruel, except that real cruelty had too many corners for hands like that. He greeted them with a voice that could have filled a ship's sails. "My lords," he said genially, and then, "My lady." With a warmth that made Illyria's eyes in turn warm a degree, not for him but for the intelligence in the room. He took John's letter, broke black wax with a thumbnail, read, and nodded at a part that made him chuckle. "Lord Snow is a man who says exactly what he means. It makes him braver than most men who prefer to hide behind their eloquence." "Do you prefer eloquence?" Oberyn asked. "I prefer survival," Wyman Manderley said candidly. "Eloquence is a way of giving the ear a reason to like what it is going to do anyway. Tell me why a man with a southern name and a northern problem is in my hall." "Because your ships can go places swords cannot," Oberyn said. "Because your kitchens are places where men confess without knowing they are confessing. Because your scribes know which ledgers lie and which can be believed. Because you are a lord who pretends to be a merchant and a merchant who pretends to be a lord, and both of those for good reasons." Wyman Manderley laughed, and it shook the table very slightly. "You have been reading the same book I have," he said. He gestured to the spread on the board. "Eat. Talking goes better when the jaw has been honestly employed." They ate fish that might have shaken hands with the boat that brought it only an hour before, and bread with crusts that had to be taken seriously, and butter that remembered cows with names. Men with round bellies and sharp eyes came and went like the tides they served. Illyria asked questions about the pattern on the city's coins and was answered by a boy who had been taught to take pride in having answers. Oberyn listened. He had come to speak, but he had learned long ago that listening is the first coin paid for any purchase worth making. "Your enemies are very recognizable," Manderley said after the plates had been beaten into honesty. "Phrase, Boltons, men who pretend to be wolves and cannot keep from licking their knives. Lions, what do you want from me? A feast? A song? I have both, and both can be sharper than they look." "I want passage for truths," Oberyn said. "Not only for men and arms. I want certain words to be said in places where ears are old and wise. I want my face to be seen and then forgotten, but the promises I'll leave behind to be remembered. I want to speak to housewives and to men who sleep by their ships. I want your kitchens to whisper that a man from the south is walking the north like a winter rumor. Not because I need my name, but because rumors make men show their teeth." "You speak of teeth often," Manderley observed. "I approve. I have a granddaughter who talks about teeth whenever she is made to eat stew. She believes teeth should be used. She is not wrong." He leaned forward slightly. "I will be plain. There are men who think the war ended at the Twins. There are men who think it did not end there at all, but at some table long before where men decided the world is a plank and they are the ones to walk it. And there are men, fewer, we are hungry, my prince, but we are not fools, who think the war is still going and that the wolves are tired of being hunted in their own forests. I am prepared to be of the last kind. I do not think it ended, Oberyn said. I think it changed hunger. I want to adapt to what it eats now. You want to feed it, Manderly said, amused. Good, then let us make a list. Men who will be useful. Men who will be useful by dying. Men who will be useful by living and being ashamed. Women who will be useful by telling other women which men not to trust. Boys whose courage can still be bent. Old men whose cold malice cannot. He made a motion with 2 fingers, and someone brought ink and a sheet already scarred by the ghost of old. A writing. Names were said quietly. Oberyn said them with the care he used when picking up new blades. He had been trained to kill men with a spear, but this was another kind of killing that had always given him a peculiar pleasure. Killing a story made of flesh and greed and vanity until all that was left was the truth. Ilaria said fewer names and said them better. Manderly said many, because his belly carried as many as his mind, and he didn't mind losing a few off the table. When the afternoon had turned into a kind of evening that city men recognized by the angle of light on their windows, a man with a fisherman's boy's dignity came and whispered in Manderly's ear. The Lord's face did a little thing that suggested that gossip had arrived that had been expected, and yet was always a fresh roll. He looked at Oberyn and said, Your enemies have made another mistake. I will tell you what it is if you can guess the color of the ribbon they have tied around it. Red, Oberyn said, reflex, because men loved red for their mistakes. Then he stopped and smiled without showing teeth. Green. Men tie green around mistakes in winter to persuade themselves they are spring. Just so, Manderly said. Go to the docks at dusk. A man with a green ribbon tied around his hat will talk about salted cod. He will be lying. He will be talking about salted oaths. Buy 2 barrels and nod as if you approve of the cod. Open them where no one can see you and read what is written on the lid. Then burn the lids and eat the cod so men will not say you wasted food. He wiped his mouth delicately. I will send a boy to trip in your path and say the word that means the man didn't lie. If the boy doesn't come, do not open the barrels until you think you are safely dead. You make plots taste like cake, Ilaria murmured. Is it your secret, to hide the poison in sugar? Is it yours? Manderly returned with a twinkle that had not ruined many men because he knew exactly where to aim it. To hide the cure in vinegar? Sometimes, she said. The cure often needs vinegar. They left the castle as the day turned to that peculiar hour when the sea takes the light and keeps it under its lip. The docks smelled of 100 suppers and 100 failures. The men who worked there had faces that had grown accustomed to the idea that every plan is a wager against a storm. A man with a green ribbon around his hat sang a snatch of a tune about cod that would have embarrassed even a cod. Oberyn bought 2 barrels and had them carried to a warehouse where men counted rope and pretended rope was money. A boy tripped gloriously and said bonfire as if it were an insult. Ilaria nodded as if she had been paid a compliment. They rolled the barrels against a wall and pried the lids up an inch. On the underside of each, in a neat hand, was written a name and a place and a time. And there was a small map sketched in a way that only men who had spent their lives trusting the arrow's truth could draw. It was a plan for a banquet that had nothing to do with food. It had places for men to stand so their faces would be seen. It had doors marked with dots that meant knives. It had an X over a chair. Ilaria looked at Oberyn. I do not believe any more in luck than in prophecy, she said. But I believe in appetite. This is ours. It is also theirs, he said. The trick will be to bring ours to the table and take theirs away. He ran his finger along a line that led to a postern door. This is where the mountain would come if he were invited, he said softly. Is he invited? She asked. No, he said, but someone like him will be. There are always second sons of mountains. He pressed the lid back down and stamped it with a heel. We eat the cod. She laughed. We eat the cod. Night made a black coin of the harbor. White Harbor's lamps looked like a constellation inventing itself for the benefit of men who needed to get home. In the tavern where they took their meal, men talked with their mouths full of the day, and women refilled mugs with the easy authority of those who have seen every kind of man and lost all interest in categorizing them except by kindness. Ilaria ate with an appetite that would have shamed a prince and did not apologize. Oberyn drank only enough to make his mouth forget the cold and remember the taste of possibility. Later, in the slender room an Honeston gives those it knows are leaving soon. They lay very close and spoke very quietly about the old woman at Grey Sunmire, and the walls hum and Jon Snow's careful hand with his letter and Wyman Manderly's laugh. They said the names of the men who had made Elia and Lyanna into banners without asking. They said them like laying stones on a road they were building. They did not pretend they were not afraid. "Tomorrow," Ilaria said, "we will find a man who calls himself a servant and has a better memory than most lords. We will tell him a story he will repeat in a different kitchen with a better stew. The next day we will go to the house of a man who sells salt to women who cannot pay him and is therefore a better investment than half the lords I have met. We will sit in his back room and drink tea that makes the tongue feel like a kitten. We will give him a list of things men have forgotten and ask him to leave the list in a place where a certain boy will find it." She closed her eyes. "We will not yet go to the banquet." "No," Oberyn said, and could feel the banquet around them anyway, a shape moving in the dark. "We will teach the room to recognize the sound of our breathing." They slept. They woke to fog that thought highly of itself. They walked a city where gulls made commentary on the economies of men. They sat in the back room with the tea that had been promised. They spoke to the servant with the Lord's memory. They bought a small hand shovel and went to the place where men were buried who had no names, and they did not dig, but they sto. Od very still and let the ground tell them it remembered. Oberyn thought of Dorne. He thought of his brother sitting with pain in his bones and the quiet in his blood that was not peace and not defeat. He thought of his daughters, each a blade of a different length and sharpness, the way they all had their mother's stubbornness and his appetite for justice. He thought of the boy with the bone needle in the hall that floated. He thought of Jon Snow's iron token, sharp only at the idea of an edge. He held it sometimes and felt in his palm not iron but the idea of a burden only the hand that held it could feel. Wyman Manderly provided them a ship as easily as a fat man offers you a second pie, and as cunningly. "Only to the bite," he said. "For now, a man must learn to be a sailor as he learned to walk, by falling where it is least inconvenient." The captain was a woman with one eye and a scar like a misplaced laugh that helped you trust her. The crew were men and boys who knew enough to take their hats off in wind and to swear in 3 languages about rope. They did not leave yet. The fog did not want them to. It was a fog that involved itself. It made the city an idea and the pier a rumor. Men moved quieter, as if to respect a weather's work. Oberyn and Ilaria used the days like thieves. Everything they did was both small and large, and they left rooms better than they found them without anyone noticing. They learned which fishwives' husbands had laughed too loud at the phrase after, and which had laughed and then been afraid. They learned which boys' fathers were away and which weren't coming back. They learned that some men had started to say the name Bolton under their breath like an apology, and some had started to say it out loud like a dare. They learned the names of 2 girls who had not returned from a market and were surprised by how much they cared. A man with a baker's flower on his sleeve and tears in his beard stopped them in the market without permission and said, "My son," with his mouth empty. They stood with him because there are moments when standing is a prayer, and he found words to say where the ice had taken his boy under without giving him back, and Oberyn asked the cold to come and ask him, if it dared, what a brother had the right to feel. At night he dreamed again of Elia's pomegranate seeds and of a room with 7 steps and a window with 4 spokes and a bed that had 3 and then 2 and then none and the boy who was not a sin, and he woke full of intention so sharp it bled into weariness. Ilaria took it from him with a kiss and gave him back only what he could carry that day, and it was enough. They were learning to run a war the way a household is run. Not by epics but by water carried and wood cut and letters folded. They had not yet gone to the banquet. The plan sat in his mind like an animal kept hungry and well-leashed. Wyman Manderly fattened them with information and with a little fat of his own good humor. Jon Snow's letter burned a little spot on his breastbone where it rested. Not enough to hurt, enough to remind. Howland Reed's hall floated somewhere in his memory, and sometimes the floor under him seemed to move in that same slow tide, holding him up even when he had forgotten there was water under him. On the fourth day, as the fog rose with the morning like a curtain pulled up by lazy hands, a boy with grave eyes and old man hands found them and pressed into Oberyn's palm a little object. A carved stone in the shape of a pomegranate, no larger than a thumb. From a woman who said to remember the seeds inside, he said, and would not say who had sent him. Oberyn held it, and it was both too small and exactly right. Ellaria watched him hold it, and she didn't speak because she understood that sometimes words are salt, and you should not put salt on a wound because you want to feel heroic. She said, a little later, "Our banquet will not be next week." "No," Oberyn said. "It will be when the men who like their knives shiny are hungry. Not before." He put the little pomegranate in the same place as Jon's token. He wanted to keep both near the better part of his ribs, where he had stored promises since he was a boy. In the evening, in a tavern where a harp tried to remember how to be a harp and a man sang a song that did not betray any specific women, they watched a fry in a corner try to drink money without paying the price. He had the look men from that river had begun to wear even in rooms where no one wanted them. A glance like a dog that knows it is too old for affection and too mean for pity. He had a knife at his belt and a second in his boot and a way of sitting as if his spine had borrowed its dignity from a chair. Oberyn could have killed him 5 ways, and he did not so much as let his fingers twitch. He went to the door instead. He stood and breathed the evening and watched the harbor do its slow breathing back. Ellaria came to stand beside him without interruption. It was the kind of moment where a man could make a speech to the person he loved and ruin the air. He did not. He said only, after a long time, "We are going to need a scribe whose fingers are quick and a girl with a voice the right kind of old men believe when she cries." "This is White Harbor," Ellaria said dryly. "We will need to choose between 6. They laughed, then quietly, and because their laughter was not a performance, it did the work it was meant to do. It made the anger in him a tool rather than a residence. He felt his sister's name in his mouth and did not say it. He felt Lyanna Stark's and did not say it. He looked at the sea, which had been here before any of them and would be here after, and inclined his head. The next morning began a new part of their work. It was more patient and more meticulous than anything he had done in a long time, more like surgery than like a duel. They made lists and destroyed them. They memorized names and then forgot them until they were needed. They closed their eyes and moved across a mental map of halls, doors, kitchens, bedchambers, privies, yards, alleys, wells, docks, counting steps out loud until it became a game with rules that seemed born of their bodies. They learned which watchmen were flirted with by which washerwomen and which women had knives in their sleeves and which men had an allergy to secrets. They built a model of the banquet in their heads made of string and pins and the intuition that had kept them alive this long. They went to a place where rope was measured and bought a length that would not chafe even when rubbed against stone. Ellaria had a whisper with a widow who kept a room above a stable with a window that overlooked a yard behind a house that was not minded as much as the front. Oberyn visited a cooper and bought a keg and a favor. They waited. Waiting became a profession. They became good at it. They never stopped moving inside it. A week later, a boy with raw knuckles whistled as they passed, and the tune was the one that meant a man had been seen leaving a house earlier than he should have left it. They turned as if they had meant to. In the alley by the fishmonger, they found a man with a scar under his right eye and a blank ring finger, and he said, "I heard you're hiring girls who can make men cry." Ellaria eyed him. "We are hiring men who can make men cry," she said. "Tell me why I should not hire a girl instead." He smiled with only the left half of his mouth. "Because you're building a net," he said, "and nets need weights at the corners." "Sit," Oberyn said. "Tell me what you know." The man sat on a crate and did as he was told. He was not handsome and not trustworthy and therefore very reliable. He had a knowledge of the habits of Fry envoys and an appreciation of unlocked doors and a memory for faces that would have made him a fine painter if he had not been a thief. He told them which man stared too long at a girl's throat. He told them which man would go to the jakes twice during a feast and complain about the seasoning. He told them which man would be so drunk at the end that he could be given a piglet to carry home and told it was his dignity. Ilaria thanked him without paying him, and he was pleased because he was not working for coin. He was working for the pleasure of the plan. The night came. It came the way nights come, with weather, with the smell of men's dinners, with the sound of ships considering their ropes. The house where the feast would be had always been a little too proud of its timbers. Freys had been invited because they had a way of inviting themselves. Boltons would not come to this one because they were busy making men write letters with their own blood. Lannisters would not come because they had better halls for their appetites. But there were cousins, and there were men who had decided they were friends of power, and there were men who just liked to watch meat being cut, and that was enough. They took their places. Oberyn was an invisible man in a gallery. Ilaria was a seamstress who had come to mend a tablecloth she had accidentally torn the day before while measuring. The girl with the believable tears sat at a corner and wept at the right times for reasons no man would dare ask her. The scribe with quick fingers had ink that did not show in lamplight. The waits at the net's corners took their places without instruction. Gravity knew its work. The feast began. Men ate, and the sounds of knives on plates were the sounds of knives on bone. There were toasts to absent lords whose absence was the only graceful thing about them. There were jokes about the weather and the coldness of maids and the warmth of wine. There was a song half begun and abandoned when men remembered it made them feel feelings. There were the little dramas of every table. A man who hated his brother-in-law's laugh. A man who wanted his stool to be higher. A man who had the contentment of a second son who had discovered he loved boats. There were faces that thought themselves handsome and faces that never thought about themselves at all. Oberyn watched. He watched the way men reached for bread and the way they touched their knives when they were not thinking about touching their knives. He watched who looked left and who looked right and who looked at the door. He watched the Frey cousin whose mouth had a pinch in it that suggested a lifetime of being corrected by uncles. He watched the slow build toward the moment when something would be said only half meant, and everyone would pretend to understand. The moment came, and it did not matter what the words were because the shape of the thing was always the same. A boast placed like a crown on a table, and the hands of the men moving toward it to see if it fit their heads. A man mentioned the twins as if they were something noble. Another man said the word guest with his mouth twisted into the kind of joke men think they are entitled to make. The small hush that followed wasn't moral. It was practical, a wary respect for the possibility of knife. Ilaria nodded infinitesimally to the girl, and the girl began to cry. She cried like a person who had been told a story that had broken something inside and had not known there was something inside that could break. Men shifted in their chairs and looked down and sworn their wives were tired and they themselves were fine. Oberyn moved like a shadow in a place where no one looks for them because all the candles point their light away. He put his hand on the beam he had measured 3 times and knew with the intimacy of his own bones. He pulled and the thing that needed to shift shifted. In the kitchen, a boy with a burn scar did something he had been told to do to a spit. In the yard, the weights leaned into their purposes. What happened then was not a bloodbath because he had not built a bloodbath. It was not a massacre. It was a version of justice. A Frey cousin stood to speak and sat down again with his dignity punctured and his plans leaking. A man who had lied 3 times in 3 minutes found his lies caught in a net of, "Are you sure?" But you said, "And which is it?" Until he sat mutely. A guard who had meant to let the wrong men through the postern door found his key missing at the crucial second and stood with his hand on his belt and the look of a man who had realized what the law was. A letter was slipped into a sleeve. A face wept not in pretense but because a woman had asked him plain, "What would your mother think?" And he had found himself too honest to answer quickly. Oberyn did not stab anyone. He did not need to. He arranged the chairs and the words, and then he let men show themselves. They did it with enthusiasm. Late in the evening, when the room smelled of cups and that sweat men have when they have been pretending to be content, he stepped away. Ilaria met him by the window that looked east, and the wind came in as if to congratulate them and take credit. "That was a meal," she said. "I am full." Men served themselves their own portions, he said. It is always more filling that way. Outside, White Harbor breathed, and the sea made the sound of men thanking each other for the day's work and not knowing it. Inside, a fry cousin was arguing with his own face in a polished plate. The weights were being lifted quietly from the corners of the net. No one noticed they were gone. In the room where they slept that night, there were 2 furs and a plank bed that cared not at all who lay in it. Oberyn lay on his back and watched the ceiling and thought of a hall that floated and a boy with an iron token and a lord who laughed like a man who loved pies and truth. He thought of a mountain-shaped hole in the future he would have to fill with something, and of a woman in a room with 4 spokes. He thought, as he always did when he was honest, of his sister's hand. "We will have to go to the Riverlands," Ellaria said. It was not a suggestion and not something she expected him to argue, though he would, for form, if she wanted the dance. "Yes," he said. "We will need to speak to a man whose face has become a bridge. We will need to show him that bridges are for crossing and not for building houses on. We will need to be careful with the ones who live under the trees," she said. "They have begun to make particular stories of their own." "Yes," he said, "and we will need to find the girl with many names the gray man warned us about." Ellaria smiled in the dark and her teeth caught starlight from a chink in the shutters. "Or she will find us," she said. "I suspect she is better at that than anyone living." He slept. He dreamed a White Harbor pastry in the shape of a pomegranate, and when he bit it, the seeds were arrowheads, and he laughed and bled and kept eating. In the morning, the fog had decided to be charitable, and the sea looked like a promise a good man could make. Wyman Manderley shook their hands as if shaking was a ritual that mattered. He put his heavy hand on Ellaria's and squeezed once. "We will do more," he said. "For now, eat another breakfast. There is no war where you do not eat another breakfast." They ate with the appetite of people who intend to be of use. Then they took their leave of the city that had served them so well. The ship's deck flexed under their feet with the same slow confidence as Reed's Hall. The old one-eyed captain set her course as if she had been born with a compass for a heart. The sails bellied, the ropes sang. The sea accepted them without ceremony. Oberyn stood at the rail and watched White Harbor recede. He felt the dragonglass weight gone from Ellaria's bundle and present at the wall, doing work in cold hands. He felt Jon Snow's letter grow lighter with every day it had done its job. It had been opened in the right rooms, it had met the right eyes, it had done no harm to the wrong ones. He felt the little pomegranate's shape against his ribs, and it felt like a joke and a grief both, which is to say it felt like family. Ellaria joined him and tucked her arm through his. The wind played with a strand of her hair, and the strand learned to like the wind. "We are going to make a list again," she said. "We are," he said. "But first we are going to watch the water for a little while and say nothing." So they did, and the world went on, and the ship cut the sea, and somewhere far north the wall hummed like a house that held against the night, and somewhere in the reeds a small hall floated, and a boy with a bone needle grew into a man, and a lord with a love for pie turned a page, and a girl with many names learned a new one and set it aside, and a man shaped like a bridge looked in a mirror and practiced looking like something else, and a mountain woke with a headache like a story that had not yet been told. The sun went up and then down because that is what it does. The tide went out and then in. The wind took their breath and gave it back. The work waited, which is to say it was kind. The names waited, which is to say they were patient. The spears leaned in their corners, and the knives slept in their sheaths like cats. And the hunger that remembers, which is the best kind, kept them company, not as a master but as a friend who knows exactly why you are not ready yet to sit down. The ship did not so much leave White Harbor as loosen its hold on the city until the rope turned thin as a hair and then invisible. The captain, who had said her name with a shrug, so it sounded like a bird's call and a dare at once, set the course with a small movement of her chin that convinced the wind to go along with the idea. The crew made a kind of music that was all rope and boot and the slap of sail, a tune the sea knew the notes to without being asked. Oberyn stood with his hands behind him and his cloak tucked under his belt so it would not flap like a proud thou. GHT. The cold came between his fingers and reminded them to be honest. Ellaria watched the grit on the deck creep along the seams as the ship lifted and settled, as if the wood were breathing. She had dressed the cold in fur and made it part of her costume. She always had a way of making the weather an accomplice. "Do you hear it?" the captain asked without turning her head. Her one eye was a dark bead set in the leather and scar of her face. It reflected nothing and so accused nothing. "The timbers," Ilaria said. "They talk to each other." The captain made an approving sound. "A good deck tells you when it is thinking. This one thinks soundly. The last man to sand it was patient. Patience lives in the grain." Oberyn walked the length of the rail and back with a gait that made room for the ship's own. He had learned in boyhood that grace is the art of letting other things move around you and making it look like a decision. He stopped near the foremast and put his palm on the tarred rope there. It yielded, a little, like a muscle prepared to be called upon but not yet summoned. "What do sistermen like to eat?" he asked the captain, because the plan ran ahead like a hound and he needed to keep it on a short leash. "Anything that has an argument with salt and loses," she said. "They will sell you the knife they used to cut your purse if you admire it first. They will tell you a lie and then remind you to pay for it. They do not forget a kindness, but they will test it until it squeals. They are a people who live by the way the sea changes its mind." "Then we will get along," Ilaria said, and the captain's mouth showed the ghost of agreement. The bite opened before them like a book with old, damp pages. The sea there had a surface the color of a thought you were not sure you should have spoken. The air carried a brine so clean it scoured the tongue of any word that had not earned its salt. Seabirds moved in a black and white script across the gray. They passed a buoy shaped like an idea that had been abandoned halfway through and still did its job. The crew nodded to it like men nod to old enemies they haven't had the energy to hate in years. A boy with a gap in his teeth hummed under his breath and tied a knot that was more beautiful than some men's signatures. Ilaria watched his hands with the respect she would have given a dancer. "What is that called?" she asked. "Bend," he said, proud, and then, "sheet bend." When the captain tipped her chin, he blushed with competence. "Maida used to say, if you can't trust your knots, you're asking the sea to tell you a story you won't like." "What story do you like?" Oberyn asked him mildly. "The ones where the man listens to the old woman," the boy said and ran off because he had said something true and his feet needed to move after that kind of work. The first day, the wind came like a gift you had not expected and therefore did not overpraise. The ship tilted and corrected and cut a path that pleased its own hull. The second day, the sea forgot it owed men anything. It heaved as if drawing a breath that would be remembered in the bones of the sailors' grandchildren. The captain planted herself against the tiller with the economy of a woman in her own body. A wave put its hand on the deck and groped it like a rude drunk and slid away again, muttering. The mast sang a single high note that might have been terror in another throat. Here it was merely function. Oberyn braced himself with a hand and a knee, and it was like sparring with a friend whose reach you knew better than your own. Ilaria made herself small and perfect under the curve of the rail and let the cold spray erase anything weak in her. She came up smiling the way a woman smiles when she has just confirmed a suspicion about herself, and it is the kind she can live with. "You're not sick," the captain said grudgingly, which in her language was, "I would keep you." "I have been aboard things that wanted to throw me," Ilaria replied. "I learned to make myself harder to move." The storm, which was not a storm so much as a weather remembering what it could do, passed like a large man through a doorway that had always fit him, and the morning after, the sea lay astonished at its own politeness. The sky showed patches that promised blue without compromising their fidelity to gray. By midday, a line of coast drew itself across the horizon, ragged as a cut from a dull knife. Low hills scabbed with gorse, cliff faces like sneers, a stubble of villages that had chosen to be here and would not be talked out of it. Sweet Sister waited as if it had always been waiting. The harbor there made an inward curl like a hand about to take something. They came in on the slack tide, the captain muttering to the water as if it were a child reluctant to leave a game. Men on the quay looked with that open suspicion fishermen wear the world over, honest because it has nothing to fear from its own utility. A bell from a house with a steeple that didn't deserve one counted the air with a sound like good iron struck carefully. A man in a coat with salt burned into its seams and a chain around his neck made of small bone pieces that had been polished by handling came down the quay as if he were a law on legs. He had the easy swagger of someone who owned none of this and all of it by consent. "Lord's Harbor Master," the captain said in a tone that indicated both her disinterest and her awareness that disinterest is one way of being respectful. "Your papers," the harbor master said, and received them as if he were blessing someone with a wet hand. He read without moving his lips, which put him ahead of most men. "Cargo. Rope, dried peas, one southern regret," the captain said, not quite smiling. The harbor master glanced at Oberyn and Ilaria and made a decision that did him credit. "You'll pay the prince's share," he said. "Which is to say, a little more than you'd like and a little less the—" "And I would." Oberyn paid. It was a relief to name the price of things and meet it. He was introduced, without ceremony, to Lord Burrell's steward, who had a nose like a command and fingers stained black from ink that had never had the kindness to come off. The steward offered ale in a mug that had known 600 lips and took their measure with a gaze that had never been in love. "You're going west," he said as if listing symptoms. "Riverlands. Men with names like tools and the morals of a table. The sisters are easy if you keep your hands where we can see your sins. West isn't so simple. Do you need a guide to find the shoals your maps don't believe in? What would you charge to keep us off the rocks?" Ilaria asked. "A promise," he said, "and a pair of hands when the rope alarms." "We make those in the mornings," Oberyn said. "Afternoons we improve them." The steward looked almost pleased. "You'll want Turn," he said. "She's too young to know shame and too old to be told to be quiet. She knows the water like a jealous woman knows a man's habits." Turn was indeed young and indeed too old. Her hair had gone white in strips, as if winter had put its fingers there and never took them back. She wore the sea and the island's ways as if both were stitched into her skin. She looked at Oberyn and Ilaria, and then at the ship's mast, and then at the harbor mouth, and made a set of those three looks that ended in a nod. "You listen," she said, "and you don't ask me to explain what I know because I won't." She nodded at Ilaria's collar. "That will need a scarf. The bite nips." "I brought one," Ilaria said, "and I know how to use it." They spent a night in a room whose bed had been made by a man who didn't expect to die in it and therefore cared, and in the morning ate a breakfast that had to be fought for. Smoked fish with bones that required teeth long practiced in humility, a porridge that forgave nothing, a pierced egg that bled gold and told you to be grateful. Oberyn drank a cup of a dark beverage that pretended to be ale and was in fact wisdom steeped in bitterness. It woke his mouth. On the quay, a band of men with knives at their belts sang a song about a woman who drowned herself because she was tired of being loved incorrectly. It was cheerful. The chorus had a clap in it. Turn spat into the water with care and led them aboard a smaller boat painted a gray so fine it had learned to tell fog it belonged. They ran along the sisters like a hand-skimming cloth. The islands took their tribute of attention and let them go. Men in small boats watched and judged and then went back to their work. A gull landed on the rail, regarded them as if hoping for something more theatrical, and left. By afternoon, the sisters lay behind, and the coast of the Vale wore the pale cliffs it favored when it wanted to show off. They did not go into Gulltown. Turn squinted at the sprawl of masts and ropes and decided the city had too many ways to teach a lesson you didn't need. They slept one night under a sky with more stars than any court could put on cloth and a wind that moved over them like a very old woman patting blankets. In the morning, they turned west for Salt Pans. Salt Pans had once wanted to be a pretty place. It had a church that had been built by men who loved arches more than men, and a market square that had been meant for apples and gossip, and a row of houses that had been painted in colors that imagined smiles. What they came into was a memory of those intentions. Char ran black up the stones like handwriting. The church had lost an eye. The market smelled of old smoke and hunger's guts. Children peered from doorways with a distrust that belonged to their parents. Turn's jaw tightened. "We heard," she said. "We never trust things we only hear." Oberyn stepped onto the quay with a care he did not often give strangers. Ilaria followed, her steps light because weight was an insult in places like this. They did not ask what had happened because the stones here would rather men did not make them repeat themselves. They walked instead, through a square where the fountain had gone dry and a dog had made a home in the basin, past a cottage where a woman was washing a pot that would never be clean, to a yard where a broken cart leaned like a drunk. A man sat on the broken cart. He had the face of a man who could have been handsome if no one had asked him for time. His hands were chapped in patches, and his hair had the look of being washed in salt and nothing else. He watched them and did not show fear because fear here was small and mean and did not prove anything. "Good day," Oberyn said. "You're late," the man said, and then made a sound that was not laughter. "Not you. Everybody." Ilaria looked at the cart. Its wheel had cracked clean through. The spokes had a little knotted rope to remind them they once were useful. "What do you carry?" she asked. "Fish when there's fish," he said. "My daughter when she wants to go to the church and pretend she remembers. When there's good news, I carry it. When there isn't, I carry nothing. It's lighter." "What's your name?" Oberyn asked. Names, correctly asked, were bred. "Lark," he said, and then, almost smiling at having made them expect something else. "Because I used to sing. I don't anymore. The sound sticks in the air here and looks at you like a dog that wants to know if it can trust you." "Lark," Oberyn repeated. "I am traveling west. Everyone who comes east says that," Lark answered. "It's the way things lie now. Men go west to find the place where their patience was left." Ilaria stepped closer, no more than the width of a hand. "We aren't here to ask you to point us at your pain," she said. "We are here to ask if you want to share the load of something heavy and useful." Lark squinted, and then smiled a grim smile that recognized its own species in the wild. He said, "I have a shovel and I've arms left in them. It needs digging." "A rumor," Oberyn said. "A long trench of rumor. We will put in it the idea that the men in the twins have begun to fear each other. We will plant there the truth that one of them writes his name as if it were a question. We will water it with small proofs. If it takes root, men will start looking at one another differently. You would be surprised how much mischief can be done when men look at each other with new eyes." Lark rubbed his palm on his tattered pant leg. "I've a wife who can make a whisper sound like it heard it from a lord. I've a boy who runs without seeming to. I've a niece who sells onions and knows where men hide their shame. Sit by my fire tonight. We'll talk and eat something that used to be alive and make the morning worse for someone who thinks he's safe." They sat by his fire. The flames were modest and kept to their own corner. The pot hung on a nail that had forgotten honor but remembered duty. Lark's wife had the kind of beauty children know without knowing the word. It was all competence and a small flare of kindness offered to those who earned it. The boy's knees had been skinned by the world and not held it against the world. The niece had eyes that counted. They told what needed telling and left out what men would ruin by having. They did not speak of Howland Reed or of Jon Snow's letter. They did not speak of Dragonglass, because that story belonged in a colder room. They spoke instead of guests and hosts, of letters and seals, of the way men walk when they have pockets full of coin. They showed Lark's niece the trick of pressing wax so the flaw looks like a flourish. Ilaria took the wife's hands in hers and put a coin there and then took it away and said, "Payment will make this less powerful. Keep the coin for the boy when he wants to leave." "What if I want him to stay?" the wife asked. "Then give it to him anyway and let him decide to spend it here," Ilaria said, and the wife nodded, chastened and grateful for the right to choose. In the morning they went to the square and bought bread from a man who had his daughter on his hip, and the bread turned their mouths into a promise. A girl in a red scarf smiled at Ilaria and then, shyly, at Oberyn, and then looked away as if she had seen a song she was too young to sing. They walked through the ruins of the church and did not perform piety under the broken arch. They left 3 candles where everyone could see them and no one could steal without feeling watched by a god. They had meant to go inland directly. Tern, with her particular stubbornness, insisted on taking them down the coast to a spit where the river's mouth complicated itself. "You can walk up from here and miss things you don't want to see," she said. "And you can meet the water where it gets honest about what it has taken with it." They did. The shoreline there was littered with evidence. twisted branches carved into the shapes of impossible birds by long rolling. A pitcher that had once belonged to a decent family and now held only a small crab. A shoe that would fit a child with a limp that had been corrected. A length of rope frayed to hair. Ilaria picked up the rope and held it in her hands like hair, too, and then tied it into a knot that had no name in the south and many names in the north, all of them about binding things you were afraid to lose. A heron stood in the shallows and decided they were not a story and therefore not worth it. A boy who had been born with islands in his blood showed them an angle of mud that would let them walk where others would sink. They took it, each step a small demonstration that intention was no substitute for attention. The riverlands greeted them without joy and without spite, which is another way to say it had grown tired of men. The trees were chewed at by war and winter. The mills mumbled their arguments with the river. The fields lay gray and wondered where their people were. The first village they came to had a wall of thorn and sticks that would keep out everything but enemies. A man with a spear made of a broomstick and a knife tied to it regarded them as if weighing whether their deaths would make the ground here teach him anything. He lowered the spear and inclined his head a fraction, which was the exact measure of the welcome they were owed. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "The place before men make maps," Oberyn said, and the man gave the small, involuntary grin of someone who has been handed a sentence he will reuse. They took the road that was not a road and the path that was an argument between deer and men. The river to their right argued with rocks and had no wish to settle. At a bend, a bridge that had been built by men who loved labor more than imagination had been torn down and rebuilt as a joke. A pair of planks and a rope and a prayer. They crossed it and did not comment. At a ford, they met two men and a woman who had the look of those who slept in woods and ate in haste and loved fiercely anything that still made sense. They had bows and a patience that comes from knowing how often bows lied. The woman's hair had been cut with a knife. Her cloak had been mended with thread that had not matched and now, by a miracle of coincidence, did. The taller man carried himself as if he had once had a different job and had not thrown it away so much as left it under a tree and walked on. "You could be those who call themselves banners," Oberyn said without challenge. "Names are for selling to fools," the woman answered. "What are yours?" "Traveling south then west then south again," Ilaria said. "And asking questions we already know many answers to." "Wise," the taller man said. He had an archer's hands and the eyes of a man who had once judged wine by smell and now judged lies. "We have a question. A boy with a fry badge was caught stealing a loaf. He said he was hungry. We fed him. He told us things. His uncle is at a small holdfast owned B. Why a cousin who wears green and pretends not to know his own sins? If we put a string across their road tomorrow night and make a music, what song do you want us to play?" "A slow one," Oberyn said, "with a chorus that makes men think of their children." The woman looked pleased in the way serious people get when you speak their language without pretense. "We can do that," she said. "Do you judge, then?" "Sometimes," Ilaria said. "Every day when I look in a glass." "Good," the taller man said. "We do not need another lord to tell us when he is ready to forgive. We need someone to tell us when to stop so we can still look." He glanced at Oberyn's hands. "You hold your spear like a man who teaches his weapon to be embarrassed by poor work. It's better than doing penance afterward," Oberyn said, and for the first time in days, the three of them laughed together with no darkness in it. They parted with no promises. Promises were made in this country and broken too often. Better to act and then speak if you needed to. Oberyn and Ilaria went on to the small holdfast, which had a gate that declared itself more loyal than its owners. The cousin in green lived behind a door that had been painted a wealthy color years ago and had since been cleaned by rain and regret. They watched for a day unglamorous, a day of meals and goats and the rhythms of a place that believed itself too small to be noticed by history. They learned how many men slept where, which boy took longer on the jakes, which woman touched her hair before lying. At dusk on the second day, the road sang. The string laid across it in the dark had the correct voice. A horse stumbled, cursed from two throats, for men swore and made the night nervous. The gate opened slowly, as if wishing to be blamed for what was about to happen. What happened was not theater. It was exactness. A man with the wrong badge found himself facing a choice between his oath and his hunger, and he chose hunger and wept after, and another chose oath and wept after, and the weeping was the part no one had counted on and thus the part that made it work. A letter changed hands as if it were only a loaf. The woman in the cloak spoke a sentence to a boy that made him 30 in a blink and then made him 10 again. No one died. A goat ran away and came back because goats understand only what is repeated. They left at first light with the letter. It had a seal that had been meant to look stern and now looked ashamed. Oberyn warmed the wax with breath and pressed a flaw into it with a nail. He read it with the calm of a man putting his tongue on a blade he has been told is not sharp. It was full of words that thought they were brave. He folded it differently and put it in a different place, and when he gave it to a different man 2 days later, the words knew better what they were. On the third day westward, in a spinney where the wind sighed like old women, they paused so Oberyn could make a small repair to the strap that held his spear. Ellaria watched the road. A rider came in a hurry and in silence. He wore a black fur that had once been rich and now was only warm. His face said he was someone's son and someone's promise, and neither of those had saved him from seeing what he had seen. He pulled up and saluted in the fashion men adopt when there is no uniform, but there is still the need to agree on a gesture. "You are the ones from the sea," he said, "with letters that make men sit straighter." "We are 2 people in boots," Ellaria said gently. He nodded as if that were a prayer he could learn. "A woman with a bear in her voice sent me to say a forester near Fairmarket keeps a map written in his head that will get you where you want to go without stepping on a phrase shadow. He will not admit this without a test. He will ask you to tell him the difference between a promise and an oath. If you answer wrong, he will give you both the wrong map and a good lecture." "What is the difference?" Oberyn asked. "An oath wants to be seen," the rider said. "A promise wants to be kept." He hesitated. "You will know him. He smells like the inside of an old tree. He had a son whose hair was the color of bread." "He will not mention him." "Your woman with the bear in her voice," Ellaria said. "What should we call her in our mouths when we speak of her?" "Friend," he said. So simply the word told its truth back to him. She swore to Robb Stark when he used to be alive. She swore, and her oath never forgot what it had promised. They found the forester by listening with their noses. He smelled like the inside of an old tree, and also like a clean axe. He had a way of looking that put a man where he belonged on the map without drawing lines. He asked the question and Oberyn answered it as if he were seated in a classroom he had always wanted to attend. The forester gave them the map in a way that did not involve ink. He looked at their feet and told their boots what to do. He gave them a slice of smoked deer and took a coin which he handed to a girl who poked her head out from behind a curtain and then fled again, giggling like someone who had been told there were still games to be played. "Do not go to the inn with the painted goose," the forester said. "Go to the one with the sign that used to be a duck before the weather fixed it. The oak in front of the wrong inn has a nail that will slide into your back if you lean. The nail has waited a long time for you to do that." They avoided the inn with the goose and found the duck. The ale there did not lie. The barkeep had a face built on principles. A woman with a shawl knit of patience and 3 colors of yarn put down a bowl before them and said, "Eat. Men think better when their mouths are working." They did. The stew had a fat that made the tongue grateful and a spice that had somehow survived the war and a bone in it that you were supposed to worry at with your teeth until you learned what it had to teach. A young girl at another table imitated Ellaria's way of holding a spoon and then pretended she hadn't when caught, and Ellaria exaggerated the gesture once more and bowed to her, and the girl blushed with joy that had survived. At twilight, Oberyn went outside to watch the road. The sky had taken on the color of a bruise healing. A man came and stood beside him without asking. He had the air of someone who had never learned to ask for space because it had never been given to him. He wore a leather jerkin that had been mended, and his hair was the color of pond scum and sun, and he had a knife he did not touch. They stood in companionable ignoring for a time. Then the man said, "They say you made the Freys look at their own plates and see what they were eating." "Men rarely look," Oberyn said, "but sometimes you can make them squint." The man grunted. "There is a woman who will want to meet you." She is not safe for men who think being alive is the same as being right. Do you want to meet a woman like that? I have been meeting women like that all my life, Ilaria said from the doorway. We send each other birthday gifts. The man looked as if he almost smiled. It smelled strange on his face. East of the ford where a man once knelt and decided to be one thing and not another, there is a willow whose trunk looks wrong. Knock twice and then once and then twice again. If a noose drops from the branches, go away. If a rope ladder drops, go up. You have very tidy rules, Oberyn said. What is your name? Garen, he said, because my mother liked the sound and didn't know what else to do about me. He left with a shuffling dignity the road would not dispute. They went to the willow on a day that had decided not to decide about rain. The trunk did look wrong. It bulged as if the tree had been forced to swallow a word. Oberyn knocked in the right order. For a very long moment nothing happened except the sound of their breath and the water eating its banks. Then something moved above them that was not wind. A rope ladder came down with a soft collapse, each rung whispering a complaint. Ilaria looked at Oberyn. Shall we? We shall, he said. He went up first. The ladder scratched polite warnings onto his palms. The hollow behind the trunk smelled like wet wood and women's hair. The light filtered as if it had been told to be honest. In that green room were 6 people at first, and then, as eyes adjusted, 9. They had the look of the Brotherhood as songs had made them without choosing whether to tell the truth. Capable, hungry, weary, unwilling to give up the game of fairness men told them was over. A man with a flat nose and a memory of a smile. A woman in a black cloak whose hands made quick movements when she was thinking. A child sitting with her back against the curve of the tree, sleeping with her mouth open and her small fingers on a knife as if it were a doll. No one asked for names. No one offered them. Oberyn put his hand on his chest and then on his brow, a gesture not uncommon in Dorne and once common everywhere, and they nodded as if a due had been paid. We want to end a dinner, Oberyn said. We want the wrong men to lose their appetite. We have a list. It does not kill men. It makes them see where the food came from. A list is a good start, the woman in the black cloak said. Her voice was not young and not old. It was the age of fairness. I have one too. She held up a length of leather, and on it were carved symbols that meant names, and next to some of those symbols were scratches meaning done. Sometimes the world wants chalk and we give it blood. They are not the same, but sometimes blood stands up well for chalk. We have brought something that tastes like chalk and writes like blood, Ilaria said. She took from her pack folded sheets of parchment that had begun their lives as idle wedding contracts for men who would never marry and had been reborn. On them were sequences of questions to be asked at tables. Who invited whom, who stood, who sat, who laughed, who cut the bread, who broke it. If asked in the right rooms, the right men will start to move in their chairs. The flat-nosed man looked at the pages as if they might bite. We have knives, he said. Knives do not do this. Knives do something else. Knives do what they do, Oberyn agreed. But sometimes questions cut where knives only scrape. There will be time for both. The woman studied Ilaria. The tree made a sound around them like breathing. You too smell of the sea and ink, she said. You smell like the wall and the neck. You smell like kitchens. You are either a lie or a hope, and I am too old to enjoy either in the wrong quantity. She touched the leather strap gently. There is a woman who is owed more than anyone owes any person. She does not forgive. I do not ask her to, but sometimes she remembers that the living can be improved. I would like to meet her, Oberyn said. He felt the iron token in his breast as if it had warmed. But not yet. Not before I deserve it. The woman's mouth almost turned in approval. That is the first brave thing you have said, she told him. You will go to Seagard first. There is a lord there who remembers how to stand up in a storm and believes tables should hold food and not corpses. If you speak to him well, he will tell you which path lets you do what you mean to do without using your enemies to teach your friends new habits. Then you will go to the twins. She lifted a hand as Ilaria's jaw set. No, not to storm, to undermine. A rat does more damage than a fire when it knows where the grain is. We know rats, Ilaria said. Some of them wear coats and rings. What kind of child sleeps with a knife under her hand? Oberyn asked the woman, because the question had made him sad and he refused to leave a room with sadness unexplained. A kind that knows she is safer for wanting, the woman said simply. Do not tell her to put it down, Tiak. Her to put it away when she eats. They left the tree when the rain began in earnest. The river ran as if irritated. The road took the wet and made do. Ilaria walked in silence for a long time, not because she had nothing to say, but because the world had said enough and she loved it still. Oberyn watched the way the drops gathered on her lashes until she blinked them away. He thought of the boy at the wall and his careful hand. He thought of the hall that floated and the coins hidden in kitchens. He thought of his sister like a word he had been trying to say correctly for years. At Seagard, Lord Jason Mallister received them as a man receives whether he has expected. He stood straight because bending wouldn't help. He wore the kind of mail a man writes his will in and then keeps wearing because it fits and life goes on. His great hall had banners that did not apologize. His men had faces that suggested they had not been granted good news without work. A hawk on a perch watched them as if calculating the distance to the meat of their throats. I risk my people when I listen to strangers, Mallister said without malice. I risk them when I do not. Choose for me. Risk them when you listen, Oberyn said. The men who profit when you do not are counting on your caution. I am asking you to risk in a way that teaches them new arithmetic. What do you want? Mallister asked, in the long-suffering tone of a man who appreciated a clear target. To set a table, Ilaria said, and Lord Mallister's mouth did the barest thing at the corner that meant he wasn't dead inside. One where knives are used properly and men wipe their mouths before they speak. One where a fry sits opposite someone who knows the story of the river better than he does. Who? Mallister asked. Old knights with sore knees who remember a boy who should not have died and keep their wine under a floorboard, Oberyn said. Young women with hands reddened from work who have learned men sit up straighter when spoken to in a certain tone. Priests who have privately decided that gods are less interested in offerings than in the truth. Lads who have made banners out of old shirts because they have not yet been told how to despair. You want to embarrass a house that knows no shame, Mallister said. Good luck, but I am a courteous man. I will send out letters that do not sound like orders and will be obeyed more quickly for that. I will give you a room where you can rehearse the evening. I will give you a list of men whose bellies are useful. Do you know a woman whose voice has a bear in it? Ilaria asked. Mallister's face altered in a way a good man's face does when you mention someone who helps him stand up inside himself. He said. Alicane. She keeps her sisters in line and reminds their men how to hold an axe. She writes a hand that could be a man's or a woman's, depending on who reads it. I'll send her word. She will not come to a hall, but she will send one of her daughters. Give that child a name she can sharpen. Can you trust men to come and not ruin it? Oberyn asked. Will your door hold against their worst habits? Mallister looked at his door and then at the men who would stand by it. Yes, he said very simply, because I will say they must. The dinner at Seagard was not a trap and was not safe. It was a field with rocks in it. Men came who had known how to be proud before they knew how to read. Men came who had eaten their cousins and wiped their mouths with their own sleeves. Men came who had forgotten that bread is a promise. They sat because the chairs were sturdy. Oberyn watched faces and hands. Ilaria moved through the room like someone translating a language to itself. Mallister said little, and what he said put men on their feet when he wanted them standing and set them down when he wanted them available. A boy introduced as a cousin of no consequence spoke a sentence about what it had felt like to kneel once and see a man's crown become a target. He did not cry. He asked 2 questions and then stopped. An old knight wiped his mouth before he stood to answer and then kept his napkin in his hand as a way of remembering. A man with a fry jaw shifted in his chair and could not stop. There was no blood. There were, however, choices. Men discovered they had to make them. 3 left early with excuses that barely deserved the name and walked out into a night that made liars look small. 2 stayed longer than was comfortable and found themselves asked to speak their names slowly enough for everyone to hear. 1 laughed and was told by an old woman near the hearth that the laugh did not suit him, and he stopped laughing not because he was shamed but because he had been correctly diagnosed. After, Mal Lister leaned on the table and set down his flagon as if returning a borrowed tool. "If you do this 5 more times, some of the right men will be afraid to go to the wrong tables," he said. "But you will need more than talk. We will need letters that cannot be proven and proof that cannot be denied," Ilaria said. "We will need barrels with wrong lids. We will need a boy who can ride at night without using the road. We will need a woman who can sit in a kitchen without being noticed until she opens her mouth and ends a man's sleep. You can have 3 of those," Mal Lister said. "The 4th is already in your company." He tipped his head at Ilaria with the blunt charm of a soldier who has discovered diplomacy in middle age. They slept that night in a room with tapestries that did not hide the cold so much as formalize it. Oberyn lay awake for a time and listened to the river, imagining itself larger than the sea. Ilaria's breath made a small warm space near his ear. He remembered Jon Snow's iron token and held it a moment in his palm, and it said nothing except what iron always says. "I am not what you are, but I am stubborn in a way you can use." In the morning came a message with a green ribbon tied around it. The ribbon made them wary. The message made them smile without showing their teeth. It was a list of supplies meant for a fry outpost on an island in the Red Fork, a place where someone had once planted willows and then decided to leave. Someone had added to the list 4 items in a different hand: wax for candles, 3 bottles of red from the arbor, onions, and 2. To what? That was the question. This was the work. They let the barrels go. They followed at a distance with the patience of cats. They watched a guard who had once been a carpenter and now was not. They watched a cook who knew how to hide a bottle and how to share it in a way that made friends. They watched a boatman who had the politeness of a man who keeps secrets for a living. They learned the island's turns by the way the wind behaved around them. They learned where the frogs sang. They made frogs sing where they wanted. On the 2nd night, when the moon wore a smudge and the men had eaten salted pork with a stoicism that proved it edible, the 2 arrived. They were girls. They wore the gray of washed-out convent linen and the gait of those who did not waste steps. They carried a basket that was too light to be worth the trip. They were admitted because the guard had once believed in the gods and still had not found the right time to stop. In the basket were onions. Under them were 2 knives that had been told they were bread. The girls went into the kitchen and did not come out for a long time. When they did, their basket was empty and their hands were clean and no one questioned the arithmetic. Ilaria stood on the bank, invisible because it is easy to be for those who assume only God watches kitchens. She listened for screams and heard none. She heard instead the slow, beautiful sound of a rope being cut carefully at 4 places so it would not betray the cut until weight came on it. She heard the subdued clatter of a jar set exactly where it would be needed in 20 breaths. She heard a girl hum, and she knew the tune, and she smiled because the world had been warm enough once to give children songs. When the boat weighed the rope the next morning, it peeled away from its cleat like a man realizing his wife had known for years. No one fell. The boat slid into the reeds. Men shouted in the strict order of their importance. In the confusion, the cook dropped his bottle and the carpenter swore extravagantly, and the guard said a prayer he had been saving for something else. The girls stood and arranged their faces as they had practiced in the mirror in the convent they did not live in. The barrels rolled a little and then settled in the wrong place, the place where someone had written, "If grain is here, move grain there." They did so. The note under the last barrel, folded 4 times, said, "He sent a letter, and with it a lie, and here is the lie's color." It was green. After that, men at outposts along the Red Fork started to worry about green ribbons. They started to complain when their wives tied their hair in them. They started to ask the color of the candles when they were lit, as if that had ever mattered. These were small miseries, but they were the right kind. In a ruined sept near Oldstones, Oberyn stood before a stone that had once been decorated with flowers on feast days and now had a moss that did the work better. He put his hand on the stone and felt how cold memories make things firm. He said nothing. Ilaria lit a thin candle and put it in a crevice and did not apologize for what would happen when the wind reached it. They sat on the steps and ate bread and a hard cheese that demanded respect. A boy came and asked them if they were married, and Oberyn said, "To each other." And the boy pondered this arrangement and approved because it meant less work for him, in his mind. "You're looking for a girl with more names than friends," the boy said. He kicked his heels against the cracked stair and listened to the sound as if it were teaching him. "She was here once. She ate like a thief and slept like a cat and didn't say why she laughed when men were stupid. The big men were afraid of her and they didn't know why. Her feet didn't make noise when she ran." "What did she take?" Ilaria asked. "A book," he said, dissatisfied. "Who steals books?" "Not me." She said, "Books make you breathe different." "I don't want to breathe different. I want to breathe better." He looked at Oberyn's spear. "Is that heavy?" "Yes," Oberyn said. "In the places you don't expect." They left the boy to the sept and the sept to the wind and the wind to its work. They left a small bundle under a stone for a person who might need it. Bread, meat wrapped in cloth, a piece of flint, a needle. They did not leave a knife because everyone here either had one or had a reason not to. The twins came into view the way a bruise does, in stages and with the body warning you what to anticipate. Two towers that had been practical once and were now arguments. A bridge that had forgotten dignity and remembered only purpose. Banners that drooped and looked foolish until you remembered what they had done and then looked like confessions. The place smelled of water and old arrogance. At the fords, reeds whispered gossip to each other and cut their own throats with it. "We cannot knock," Ilaria said. "No," Oberyn agreed. "We will make them open the door to scold us for a thing we have not done." They did not do that first. They watched. They learned the rhythm of tramps and silences. They learned which man drank at which hour and which hour made him softer. They learned the color of the light on certain stones in the afternoon and which shadow would hide a person and which would peel off like paint the moment the sun moved. They learned how many steps from the east tower door to the first turn and what the second stair felt like underfoot. They learned where the cooks gathered to whisper and curse and laugh. They learned the two names of the man who owned the dogs and the three names of the dogs and which name they answered to when they were frightened. They found a boy who scrubbed the tops of tables with a piece of old cloth. His fingers were raw. He had a way of putting down a plate that said he had not yet learned to hate. Ilaria spoke to him like a woman who had once been a girl exactly his age and had been told she was smart and had lived long enough to find out they had been right. He told her which cousins hated which other cousins. He told her where the meat wagons came from and how many hands counted the meat. He told her which guard had a sister with a child who coughed. He told her when the child coughed. Oberyn sat on the riverbank with his spear across his knees and watched the way the water used the bridge. He counted how many breaths it took for a leaf to go from one arch to the next. He timed the patrol and then broke the times and then set them back together. He found a broken place in the stones where a man could put his fingers and move a little without the bridge being offended. He tasted the air and found the taste of iron, not from blood, but from a certain kind of nail used in the northern counties. A certain kind of nail had a head that rusted just so. He planned with nails. He liked that about the day. When the time came, it was not a night full of music. It was a gray evening that had considered rain and found something else to do. Men were tired in a way that comes not from work but from the delay of punishment. Women in the kitchens tied their hair back and talked about bread. A dog lay with his chin on his paws and dreamed of something that made his feet twitch but not enough to wake him. The boy who scrubbed tables sang under his breath a song that no one had taught him. It had been waiting in his throat like a birthright. Oberyn crossed under the bridge in the way a man crosses under a thing he disrespects politely. He found the broken place and put his fingers and then his toes. He climbed without needing the help of spectacle. He found the postern where the girls with the knives had taught the rope to betray the men who trusted it, and he smiled at the memory of the rope's surprise. He had no rope, he had only hands. It was enough. He reached the slit in the stones where men had meant to put a lookout and had put, instead, a barrel that had never been moved because a man had died on a different day than the one he was meant to. He slid his body through a space he should not have fit and did not think to be proud. He crouched in the dark and listened to the house make its old noises, the ones buildings make even when men think they are quiet. Settling, stretching, remembering. Ilaria, in the kitchens, spilled a jar of barley in a deliberate accident that made 3 women bend and curse and laugh. While they bent, a little parcel fell from Ilaria's sleeve into a crack by the hearth. The parcel contained a question written on a clean sheet in a hand that could have belonged to any man. And the question was, "What did your husband say he did when he did not come home the night they fed the music?" It was a question with a hook in it. It would catch some fish today and more tomorrow and then tomorrow again. A door opened on the 2nd level of the East Tower. A man came out who believed himself unobserved. He had a mouth that looked as if he said his own name when he woke to remember it. He turned down a passage and knocked on a different door with a rhythm that men use when they have been told they are allowed to enter rooms not meant for them. The door opened and a voice said, "You're late." And the man said, "No, I'm early." And the voice did not contest the point because it had been arguing all day. Oberyn moved past the slit and along the narrow way men had built along the inner wall. He had the patience of a man who had learned to make wine and to wait for it. He came to a small square cut in the wall at shoulder height, a place where a crossbowman could put the end of his weapon and find no give. He put his eye there. He saw a table. He saw the cousin with the mouth that pinched. He saw a woman wash a cup and put it down and look at it and put it down again, harder, and he loved her for how exactly she had placed her anger. He whispered to the stone because sometimes stone can be recruited, and the stone did its job, which is to say it was there. The plan, which had been built with thread and patience and the knowledge that while men eat they are least inclined to think, required a thing that was not dramatic. It required that 4 men arrive at 4 doors at 4 times and forget themselves for a single heartbeat. It required that a hand push a cup just enough that it sat at the edge of a table. It required that a child ask an uncle for a story right when the uncle was prepared to tell a lie. It required that a dog bark because a cat walked along a wall, and the cat walk because a fish head had been thrown in the yard, and the fish head be there because a cook had saved it for a boy she liked and then forgotten which boy. All of this happened, and 2 other things that had not been planned. The first was a small mercy. A man with eyes that had not gone flat saw another man reach for a knife because he had been dared and put his own hand over the knife as if it were his own and said, "Not here." And the second man, who had wanted someone to speak to the part of him that still believed in rooms where knives were not used, sat down. The second was a pettiness. A fry, offended by a joke that had measured his width quite closely, stood and pushed his chair back, and the chair fell and the sound went through the house like a slap. Men laughed, the wrong men and the right, and the fry flushed and left and ran into a woman in the passage who did not move. He made to push her and found he could not push a mountain, and he went around her and learned, in a way he would not admit, that he was small. When it was over, nothing was over. No bodies lay where they should not. No banners fell. No victories were sung. But a door that had been shut opened. A letter that had been written was not sent. A man who had waited to be told how to be good that day decided he would tell himself. A woman in a kitchen took the question from the crack and carried it in her pocket as if it were a stone she meant to throw at a dog if it attacked her child, and then found a different use for it. And somewhere in the maze of the twins, a boy with a cloth who scrubbed tables found a coin under a bench and did not tell anyone. And he kept it not because he was greedy, but because the coin, which had on it the image of a fish, made him believe in rivers again. Later, outside, on the bank where the reeds talked, because that is what reeds do when wind has time for them, Ilaria leaned her head against Oberyn's shoulder and did not let herself become relief. She let herself become comparison. "It will not be enough," she said, as if she were talking to someone who had argued with her. "It is not meant to be enough," he said. "It is meant to be part of the math." "What is the sum?" she asked. "Less hunger," he said, and felt foolish and true at once. "For the ones who have had enough of eating the wrong thing." They went a little farther down the bank where the mud took their footprints as if to remember them forever for an afternoon at least. A fisherman sat on an upturned crate and mended a net with a needle that had been passed down through 5 hands. He looked up at them and said, "Do you know what I like best about nets?" "What?" Ilaria asked, amused. They look like nothing when they are empty, he said, and like everything when they are used. He held up the net and squinted at the small square of sky through it. And they are made of holes. That is the part men never understand. They walked. They slept in a barn where the hay smelled like a promise you could keep with work. They woke to a girl holding a kitten up to Oberyn's face and asking if the kitten looked like him. He said yes, because the kitten had patience and violence in equal parts, and the girl approved of her own joke. They went to a village where a septon with a burned hand spoke a homily about bread and the parts of men that do not get mentioned in polite sermons. He saw Ilaria in the back and said the word mercy in a way that did not make her roll her eyes. He saw Oberyn's spear when everyone else pretended not to and said the word justice in a way that did not make Oberyn grind his teeth. After, he shook their hands and said, "You will never know what this did." And they told him they did not need to know, and he liked them for that. In a lane lined with hawthorn, a fox crossed in front of them and did not hurry. It looked at them as if to say, "You do your work, I do mine. We will both be scolded." Ilaria bowed her head to the fox, and the fox, who had no use for courtesy, still approved. The wind pulled at the hawthorn's flowers and made a number of them fall that pleased the eye in a way that felt like guilt. Nights lengthened. Fires seemed more honest. The list in Oberyn's head grew until it had to be tamed with measures and columns like a general purging his own excuses. He put fruit names on enemies so he could say them full in a room where a fry might be listening. Apple was a man who managed other men's fear. Plum was a woman who invited betrayal to her table and served it fat. Pear was a boy who wanted to be cruel and only managed clumsiness. Ilaria took his list and made her own beside it. Thin lines in a quick hand. Flaw too proud. Flaw lonely. Flaw tired. Flaw secretly kind. They learned to say good evening to men they would ruin and mean it. They learned to give coins to women who would ruin men and thereby improve them. They learned to drink milk in rooms where beer would have made them stupid. They learned to refuse meat when it was offered by hands that had not washed. On a day when the sky had not decided whether it was winter or the idea of winter, a rider in a brown cloak found them near a tumble-down watchtower that had guarded nothing in a long time but weeds. He reined in and raised an arm in what had become, around them, a sign that said you have been expected by someone who was not sure you would come. He had the Mal-Lister falcon sewn small and proper at his breast. He passed a folded paper down with rueful pride. "From Lord Wyman," he said, "by way of Lord Jason, by way of a woman who scolds your plans gently so they do not become bored with themselves." Oberyn broke the seal and read while Ilaria watched the rider's horse flex its ears. The letter was not long. Said, "The cod were eaten. The barrels floated away exactly where they should have, which is to say into the story we wanted. The man with the green ribbon drowned in his bathtub, which is to say, he fell asleep in his own water and the water did not forgive him his laziness. A boy with clever fingers has found a friend whose cleverness will keep him alive. Also there is a pie recipe enclosed, which will work even in poor ovens, which is to say not at all here but perhaps elsewhere." It did, in fact, include a pie recipe. Ilaria laughed and had to sit down to finish laughing properly. The rider gave them a second message. He did so with an embarrassed flourish because he was a rider and not a messenger, but sometimes a man must play two roles even if he looks foolish in one. The second message was in a hand Oberyn did not know and could not mistake. It was a firm hand that had been taught to write by a woman who wore furs and did not permit blots. It said, without preamble, "The girl you seek goes quick. She has friends that are mistakes waiting to happen, and some that are promises. If you find her, ask her to keep her knife under her hand and her hand under her eyes. If she gives you a name, do not use it. Keep it like a little coin to rub in your pocket. If she asks about wolves, tell her the wolves remember. Signed A." Ilaria read it and said, "A is a lovely letter," and Oberyn said, "It is," and neither of them named the bear. They did not find the girl then. They found her trail, which was one part dust, one part rumor. In an inn with a lopsided hearth and a cat who made her bread from nap-taking. The innkeep said, "No girl here with any name. Last week a lad paid for a room with a coin from Bravo's, but he was too much himself to be from there. If you see him, Tell him he owes me an apology for making my wife love him for no reason." In a farmyard, a child said, "She ate the apple without cutting it." In a quarry, a man said, "She looked at me as if I were a stone that had not realized it was a statue." They nodded and let the girl be larger than they were. Sometimes you must walk around another person's story and let it cast shade on you with its shape. They went at last to a place where the river bent like an elbow and made men walk farther to cross it. There was a bridge there no one had bothered to make beautiful. There was a toll. The man who took it had a face that had been made of all the wrong kinds of pride. His bones stuck where vanity had once held flesh. He said, 3 coppers to pass. To a woman pushing a cart of onions, and she paid, and he put a coin aside for his own purse in a way that asked for correction and received none because men were tired. Oberyn and Ilaria watched, and then Ilaria walked up to the toll and put down 2 coins only. The collector flicked a glance at the spear slung on Oberyn's back, and then at Ilaria's hand, and then at her face. He shook his head. 3, 2, she said, and a piece of advice. She pushed the coins toward him like a pair of small boats. "Stop taking your own money." He looked startled, then angry. He reached for the coins and she covered them with her hand. She smiled, a small, wicked thing like a candle lit for herself. "No, listen. Take 3 when you must. Men pay. That's the way of the world when roads belong to those who can keep them. But do not take your own money. It will make you look poor in front of the only people whose opinion of you matters." "Whose?" His anger had nowhere to live in the face of a tone like that, and so it had to haul its furniture to a new room. "The people who stand behind you when someone is angrier than you are," she said. "If you insult them with your small thefts, they will leave you alone with your big violences." She uncovered the coins. 2, and a piece of advice: you will not take it first. But your wife will hear about it and make you. The man took the coins because his hand had been taught never to deny coin. His mouth tightened in the way a mouth does when it wants to deny wisdom and cannot because it has been fed it in a way that made it taste like meat. He nodded once, barely, and the onions rolled past, and the woman with the cart looked at Ilaria as if she had taken off a shoe that had been pinching her for 7 years. They crossed, and the river made a noise like a man who has resigned himself to carrying too much for too long and found his back had become stronger for it. On the other side, a field lay fallow where wheat had been, and in it a boy had been set by his mother to find stones. He held a stone in his hand and inspected it with the seriousness of a priest naming sins. He looked up as they passed and said, "There's a story about a man with a spear who made other men use their words and not their hands." "Is it a good story?" Oberyn asked. "It is if you like words," the boy said doubtfully. "Do you like words?" "I like the ones that fit where knives would only break things we need," Oberyn said, and the boy filed that away in the place where boys keep sentences they will use when they are taller and slightly more frightened. They made a list of where they must go and where they must be seen not going. They wrote Seaguard again and Fairmarket and Old Stones and Harrenhal, then scratched Harrenhal out because it was not a place for work but for curses. They wrote Raventree Hall and underlined it, because men there had long memories and some care for living trees in a land that had cut too many down to make fires for men whose hearts never warmed. They wrote the inn at the crossroads and drew a little skull next to it for humor, as if by flagging danger you made it less. They wrote Willow Heddle without knowing whether she would tolerate another scheme. They wrote the twins again and put an apple by it, because it would need a different fruit next time. They wrote the wall, tiny, in the corner because it had to be on every list. They did not go to King's Landing. That would be later, if at all. There, a woman taught mountains to walk. There, a dwarf had been made into a ghost by the same men who had profited from his cleverness for years. There, a queen believed the world was a room where she could lock the door from both sides. They would need a different set of skills for that place and a different patience. They did not let their tongues rehearse speeches meant for lions. They let the north fill their mouths again. Rumor traveled like a woman with a basket, quickly and in the right places. It began to be told that a Dornishman and a woman with a fur collar that became her had made men talk at tables. It began to be told, wrongly, which made it stronger, that the Dornishman never touched a knife and that the woman always did. It began to be told that green was unlucky, and that barrels lied, and that ropes were traitors. It began to be told that the phrase had lost a thing and could not say what without admitting the name of the thing. It began to be told that certain doors were now oiled in the twins, and certain chairs moved, as if by moving the furniture men could take the rearrangement into themselves. They went back rough White Harbor by letter only, because the city could be trusted to do what it had begun. Wyman Manderley sent one more recipe, this one for a soup that began with onions and ended with laughter, and a note that said, "If you are careful, the lion will try to join you at table to watch. Do not let him think he has an invitation. Let him lick the soup from his own whiskers." From the neck came a word carved on wood and delivered by a man who stank of frogs and honesty. The word was remember. Oberyn held the little plaque and smelled reed and smoke and the small, bitter green that had once kissed his tongue in Howland Reed's hall. He put this, too, against his ribs. He was becoming a man with talismans pressed to his skin. It was dangerous and it was good. He arranged them in his shirt so that his heart knocked them in a rhythm that made that heart brave. They came late in a pewter-colored afternoon to a farm where a woman was planting around graves. She placed cabbages at the heads and leeks at the feet. She pressed the soil with her palms and then her fingers and then the heel of her hand, as if baking a loaf. She did not cry and she did not sing. She looked up when they stopped by the fence and said, "Do not tell me what should be done. I am doing it." "We have nothing to tell you," Ilaria said. "We want to see if you need seed for the spring." The woman's face softened in a way that made it clearer how hard it had been. "The ground does," she said. "The ground wants to be asked to live." "We are asking," Oberyn said. He paid a boy with a hat that had 2 ears sewn on it to fetch them a sack of seed from a man who pretended all his sacks were full. He stood with the woman and pressed earth with her until the smell ran up his nose and told him things about his own life that he was embarrassed to need telling. He did not say his sister's name to the dirt. He did not say lioness. He said bread, and he said mercy, and he said long. That was enough. News came that the Bolton man with hair like bread dough had been seen at the Dreadfort walls laughing, and that the laugh had carried like sickness. News came that a fry had tried to stage a play about a wedding, and no one had come because the players had found other work worthier of their faces. News came that a woman in a far wood had hung a man and cut him down and hung him again because she had learned from men that the first time might be a mistake. These were the parts of the world that did not need them. They did not refuse the world because of it. At the edge of a long field of stubble, a man with a sling stood with 6 boys. He showed them how to wind and how to let go at the right beat, so the stone flew straight and not as a tantrum. He saw Oberyn and Ilaria and gestured the way men who teach gesture, with his whole torso, as if the invitation were a shelter. "You'll show them something," he said without question. Oberyn took the sling. He had grown up with men who thought slings for boys and were wrong, and he had learned respect for the weapon the way men learn to love a woman who surprises them. He set his feet and told the boys to look at his hips and not his hands. He let the stone fly and caught it again in the same breath, and the boys gasped because it had gone right where he had looked. A cracked shin of a scarecrow, a piece of pottery someone had put on the fence to be humiliated. Ilaria stepped into the boys and adjusted an elbow, a wrist, the line of a shoulder. "Forget the clever part," she told one. "The stone already knows it. You only have to show your body when to get out of the way." Someone cheered. It might have been a mother. It might have been the scarecrow with its destroyed shin. They left before anyone could ask where they were going. They went where the work was. White Hill men in the west. A peddler with good boots and bad feelings in the south. A house where the door hinges had rusted and the old man inside had not moved in 3 days. And Ilaria boiled water and spoke to him like a good thief and made him show her his hiding place so she could put medicine there for when he would need it and not forget where it was. A shrine where better men than they had laid down their tired and their hard and then taken them up again. A river where a bridge had slipped sideways and become a ford, and they stood and helped people across, because sometimes the story is that simple and work is holy. At night, when they had fire and sometimes even a wall around that fire, they spoke of what next. Seaguard again, yes. Raventree, yes. The twins, always. White Harbor, later. The city could handle itself. The Vale? Possibly because there were men there who thought a gate was a way to make sense of a life. The neck? Yes, for the marsh remembers and sometimes it gives you your name back. The wall? Yes, because a boy there would need to be reminded that men in the South knew the North changed the scale of things and it frightened them correctly. And always, King's Landing sat at the edge of their talk like a man at the end of a table who pays the whole bill because his money is dirty and he wants to prove it can be used to clean. They kept their voices off it. They let it be large in silence. They sharpened themselves in other places. They met one morning when the frost had turned the grass to glass and the sky to pewter, a man walking with a pig. The pig was pink and dignified and walked as if attending a wedding. The man had a hat that did not match his face. He said, "If you are the two who embarrass men at tables, I would like to hire you for my mother's birthday." Ilaria looked at his pig. "We do not take coin from pigs," she said. "They pay in truffles and gilt." "We have both," he said, delighted. "Come." She is 93 and wants to be told who failed her, and she will not die until that list is completed. "Those are plenty of years," Oberyn said, smiling. "She will live more," the man essay, ID with confident dreariness. "She has a ledger of spite that would fit in a priest's box. Do not be too proud. You will be part of it before the day is long." They went, laughing because laughter is a way to keep warmth in the chest when the day is mean. They went because old women deserved a birthday with a well-reasoned argument. They went because the pig seemed to approve. They went because their work was the 1,000 small ways you turn a river that thinks it cannot be turned. And because in the morning, when they woke and the frost had weakened and the day was promising to be no worse than it had to be, they would need to go on, past this farmhouse and the next, and then past the farmhouses where men still thought the world had quit paying attention. They would walk and speak and listen and touch the rope and the stone and the paper and the hand and teach each to betray its worst habit. They would carry a hunger that remembered, and they would feed it sparingly, so that it would not devour them before it devoured what had to be devoured. They turned toward the farmhouse. The pig snorted, pious and expected. In the distant fields the wind laid the frost down and lifted it again as if trying on the day's garment. The river nearby made a sound like a man who had decided to keep living for the small reason that the next breath would be warmer than this one. The work waited, friendly as a chair by a hearth, and unforgiving as the hearth without wood. They walked to it. Across the river another road traced a line toward a wood where ravens nested in trees they liked better than most men. Somewhere beyond that wood, a girl with too many names held a book and did not read it and then read it all at once. Somewhere farther, men in a red tower decided a color could protect them from their sins. Somewhere on the coast, a man with more courage than patience and less luck than either pointed a ship east and called the water by the wrong names and went anyway. Somewhere in the marsh, a hall floated. Somewhere along a wall, a boy stood with his palm on stone and pretended not to hear a sound that sounded like the world reminding him it existed. And here, 2 people in boots followed a pig to a party where an old woman would instruct them in the ways of their own craft, because all crafts are taught again and again by those who have done them long enough to be bored. They went, and the day accepted their decision. The list in their heads did not grow shorter. It grew smarter. The names on it did not disappear. They grew smaller. The knives in their sheaths did not leap out. They slept like cats with one ear turned to the door. The hunger that remembers walked between them like a child whose hands they held not to keep from running away, but to teach how to walk on ice without breaking it. After the birthday, after the pig had been honored and the mother had listed the ways men had failed her with a satisfaction that made her bread taste better to her own mouth, after the sons had laughed and not been spared, after the afternoon had turned its face to evening and even the ravens had gone quiet out of politeness, Oberyn and Ilaria stood in the yard under a sky that had decided to be beautiful, as if it had been rude earlier and wished to make amends. The farmhouse door let out a ribbon of warmth that smelled like cabbage made decent by fat. A dog that had never learned to be cynical about kindness put its head under Ilaria's hand and made a sound that healed something small in Oberyn he hadn't noticed had suffered. "We are making a road," Ilaria said, "stone by stone." "We are," he said. "We may never walk the whole of it. We will walk enough to teach men where it goes," she replied. And someone else will do the rest without telling us. That is the best way. He looked up, and a star had found a piece of clear air and clung to it. It looked fragile, and it did not fall. He put his knuckles to his lips and breathed on them and felt the iron token warm again and pressed the small carved pomegranate against it so his ribs made a little music no one could hear. In the morning they went west. They went to a tree where a rope ladder would fall only for certain knocks. They went to a ford where a woman would once more say, "Not today, knife." They went to a hall where banners knew they were mere cloth and were proud anyway, because the people under them were tired and had kept their dignity. They went to an inn where the girl with many names had been yesterday and would not be tomorrow, and that was correct. They went to a bridge where a boy learned to spit well enough to be a man someday. They went to places where the world had been hurt and was healing, not because anyone had sung a spell, but because many hands had been put to it with the right rhythm. North, the wall hummed. East, the sea remembered. South, a city put on a false crown every morning and lied with skill and audience and was applauded for both. West, a land waited to be taught that it could forgive itself without forgetting. Here, Oberyn and Ilaria walked with purpose that did not need a herald, and a spear that found its place along a man's spine, and a list that never lost weight because as each name was crossed off another name was revealed under it. Not an enemy, but a person who needed to be saved from the wrong part of himself. They walked and did not tire because the hunger that remembers fed them, and they fed it back and both lived.